correction that one made, but I forgot to call it in. Hi, Michael. I think I left off one item when I did the thing I did.
Oh, good.
There's your answer. Kim's here. Kim's here.
Yeah. Good. We thought we better not.
Do you want to read it?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Oh, great, okay. And
Hey, Ann.
down there and shake their hand?
Okay.
Perfect, thank you.
Eileen? What's up with all the people out there? Look at all the people out there.
I don't know, well, I think the Lions are gonna come back in from Cleveland Avenue, go in and
The council met in closed session and gave direction to staff and the consultant regarding negotiations for property at 540 Cleveland. The meeting is now in recess until after the regular council meeting. The regular council meeting of Albany City Council will come to order. This is Monday, May 19th. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States, to the republic
Roll call.
Councilmember Atkinson,
Present.
Councilmember Barnes,
present.
Councilmember Moss,
Here.
Vice Mayor Weil,
Here.
Mayor Thompson.
Here. Next item, please.
Consent calendar. Consent calendar items are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. By approval of the consent calendar, the staff recommendations will be adopted unless otherwise modified by the City Council. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a council member or a member of the audience requests removal of the item from the consent calendar.
Is there any item a member of the council or the staff would like to have removed? Is there any item a member of the public would like to have removed from the consent calendar? Seeing no one, the chair will bring this back to council and entertain a motion regarding the consent calendar.
I move approval of the consent calendar.
I'll second that.
Been moved by Vice Mayor Weil, seconded by Councilmember Moss, that we approve the consent calendar. Would you please poll the council?
Councilmember Atkinson,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes,
Aye.
Councilmember Moss,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Weil,
Yes.
Mayor Thompson.
Aye, and the motion carries. Next item, please.
Presentation, proclamation in recognition of the Albany High School women's wrestling team.
This is a wonderful occasion. We want to congratulate the girls, and Councilmember Atkinson is going to read the proclamation. Would you ladies come up front so we can honor you?
And the coach. Come on up. And why don't you sort of stand in a half circle to look out at the audience?
There you go. Perfect.
Face this way.
Where's the camera? So, Coach Rose, why don't you come up? Where are you? And Jay's Mr. Griffin, Coach Griffin, both of you guys. I didn't see you over there. Well, I need to read, okay, I'll read it from here then, but I'd like to read it to you right here. And I've just been informed that the coach, Jason Griffin, has received the Assistant Coach of the Year from the California Coaches Association. So congratulations. And as a former teacher at Albany High School and presently a sub very often there, and I know Mr. Rose, Coach Rose, for many years, and Jason actually I knew as a student. So I'm very proud to have you here tonight. And ladies, very proud to have you as representatives of Albany High School and the district. So it says, Proclamation in recognition of the Albany High School women's wrestling team. Whereas the Albany High School women's wrestling team is comprised of hardworking and dedicated women and coaches, whereas every team member finished their season with a winning record, and whereas individually the team had 2 state placers, 2 state champions, and finished the season as the #1 women's wrestling team in the state. Yeah. Wow. And whereas the Albany High School women's wrestling team won an award as the top achieving academic female winter sports team in the North Coast section. Wow. And whereas the team has successfully broken all previous records for Albany High women's wrestling, and whereas the Albany High School women's wrestling team has made history as the first team to win a state title in any sport at Albany High and will enter the Albany High School Hall of Fame. I hope that includes you too. Wow. And I'm not finished. Whereas the team has surpassed any and all expectations from their peers, coaches, and community, demonstrating achievement through the power of commitment and teamwork. And whereas the following women's wrestling team members are recognized for their successes: Ireri Morales, sophomore. She placed 7th at North Coast. Hannah Minsky, sophomore, who I think cannot be here tonight. She placed 7th at North Coast. Brianna Padilla, sophomore, placed 6th at North Coast. Anastasia Malanche, junior, placed 4th at North Coast. Eva Pirath, sophomore, placed 2nd at North Coast and 6th at State. Nayeli Patino, junior, placed 1st North Coast and 3rd at State. Erica Sotelo, a junior, placed 2nd at North Coast and 1st at State. And Chanel Chawalit, placed 2nd at North Coast, 1st at State, and 1st ever 2-time state champion. So now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the Albany City Council hereby recognizes the Albany High School women's wrestling team and congratulates the team for their recent achievements. And congratulations to you gentlemen who have had a great season and a real inspiration, I know, to the ladies. So thank you for being here. Thank you so much for being here, ladies. Would you like to say something about... Come on, Coach. I can't believe you don't have something to say. I know you did before. Thank you.
You know, I told them that this was something that I didn't expect as a coach. I knew they were a great team. In the past, we had a team that placed 4th in the state, and coming into the season, I thought that this team was better than that team, and they really came out and proved it and exceeded all of my expectations. I never thought that we would win state. Also, along with winning state this year, for the first time ever, there was a college coach that was doing rankings on a national level, and he ended up giving us the national trophy, saying that we were one of the 2 top teams in the nation. So that was a big thing also. So congratulations, ladies, and can't wait to do it again next year.
Congratulations to you all, with job well done. Next item, please.
Good of the city.
Before we do that, I know some of you have homework, so if you want to leave, you're welcome to do that.
Thank you.
Good of the city public forum announcements for person desiring to address the city council on an item that's not on the agenda. Please note that city policy limits each speaker up to 3 minutes. The mayor may reduce the time limit per speaker depending on the number of speakers. The Brown Act limits the council's ability to take and/or discuss items that are not on the agenda. Therefore, such items are normally referred to staff for comments or to a future agenda.
Okay, and the first item that I would like to draw our attention to is called Reading for Pause. It's a new program, and Vice Mayor Weil is the instigator of this program. I think it's a great idea. It's wonderful for the kids, and I'm hoping that over the summer that the program will grow. But we have some pictures, and maybe we could have a little bit. Would you like to talk about it a little bit?
I'd be happy to. So every Thursday from 4 to 5 in the Edith Stone Room at the library, we have the program Pause to Read, and children sign up and read to dogs, and you can see many pictures there of my dog, Jake, who is a 100-pound hound, majestic hound from Rocket Dog Rescue. And so the children read to him each week, and we've also had other dogs who've visited and been read to, and look forward to having kids come each time. And children actually improve their reading scores when they do this regularly, so we encourage parents to come and visit the library and visit this program. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne, and thank you, Peggy McQuaid, for the pictures. Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to? Oh, you have them. Okay, thank you.
Kim Denton, Bruce Dixon, Alan Maris, and Peggy McQuaid.
Mayor Thompson and members of the council, I'm here on behalf of the Relay for Life Planning Committee, and we want to thank you tremendously for all the support that you gave us during our Relay for Life. We actually reached our goal this afternoon of $25,000, and the money's still coming in, so we're very excited. We had 185 people come throughout the weekend. We had 37 survivors come, which is actually almost double what we had last year, so that was our good goal too. And we had 14 teams, and just over the weekend we brought in an additional $4,000. And I wanted to thank the Albany Firefighters Association. They actually provided breakfast for all the registered participants. The Albany Peace Officers Association, for the first time, did a survivor lunch, free to survivor lunch, and then it was at a cost for the rest of them. And then the Rotary provided dinner for us. And we had a very good event. Thank you.
And thank you for all the work you did.
Yeah, I think we want to actually stand up and praise Kim's work here.
It was well worth the effort.
How do you follow an act like that? I don't know if everyone here knows me. My name is Bruce Dixon. I'm president of the Albany Lions Club. And I'm here to thank you guys for donating. You did a CDBG grant last year, and donated to Rebuilding Together, which is it's an organization whose mission statement is to do free home repairs for elderly, disabled, and low-income homeowners. People that live in substandard conditions, we get together and we fix their houses for free. We used to do this every year in Albany, but it hasn't happened for about 5 years. So last year I went to Beth Pollard and we talked, and you guys got the grant together and donated $3,000, and I would like to give you a brief report on what we did with that $3,000. There's no lack of people in any city that need help. And this person, his father bought a house in 1984, 941 Pomona. The guy's name is John Martinez, and Mr. Martinez passed away at the age of 100. So John Martinez couldn't keep up with the maintenance of the house. It got leaky. When I first saw it, it was a massive mildew infestation. It was literally making his family sick. So what we did was we got him signed up through Rebuilding Together. We got volunteers on site with all the safety equipment, bunny suits, Tyvek, everything. And we performed a mildew abatement. We painted kitchen, bathroom, two bedrooms, and the entire exterior of the house. With that $3,000, we performed work that my best estimate, and I do estimates all the time, about $15,000 worth of work we did on this house. This was my 17th time captaining a project with Rebuilding Together, my 22nd project overall. If you count painting 4 houses in 8 days in Louisiana after hurricane, count that as one. So I'd like to do this again next year. If you guys put in for the grant and donate it to Rebuilding Together, we can do this again next year. There was more that we could do on this property, but we ran out of money. So I just wanted to say thank you. This was a huge project. We had Albany Lions Club members, Albany Rotary Club members, the Albany Firefighters Association donated and installed 7 smoke detectors and 2 carbon monoxide detectors. It was a huge health and safety. It was, the house was making them sick, and it was bad. But now it's very good, and I'd like to say thank you.
Thank you so much. It's a great project. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Alan Maris. I'm a member of the Albany Board of Education, speaking for myself. I had hoped to say something about the girls wrestlers. It's on the agenda, but you didn't ask for us to speak, so may I say a couple words?
Please.
Sure. I think this demonstrates, I'm so proud of those girls, and what our community does for our citizens, our students. And I think, to me, it's a beautiful illustration of what we've done with civil rights in the 60s, passing Title IX for girls' athletics, equal participation, I think in the 80s. It's bearing fruit, and it's really exciting to see these girls have the opportunity to perform and see how well they do when they're given that opportunity. So congratulations to all our politicians and people who support them. In a related matter, I would like to see us do something to help the schoolgirls of Nigeria return home. If we could write a resolution and give it to Barbara Lee, that might help to show that the whole world is really concerned about those girls who lost their freedom to perform to their utmost. So if you would consider doing that, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Peggy McQuaid, Albany resident, and I'd like to invite you all to join the Albany High School bands tomorrow night at the 2nd annual concert at Memorial Park. The Albany High School Wind Ensemble, Symphonic Band, Orchestra, and Jazz Lab will perform a free outdoor concert for the entire community starting at 7 p.m. And this is sponsored by the Albany Community Foundation. So we hope you come early, enjoy a pre-concert picnic dinner in the park with your family and friends. There won't be any food available to purchase, so please remember to bring your own dinner, bring your own wonderful culinary delights. The Albany High School's award-winning music program promises to provide an evening of delightful entertainment. This end-of-the-year concert will showcase the talent of these remarkable musicians to the entire community on the park's outdoor stage. The Community Foundation is proud to sponsor this special event by providing the organizational framework, publicity, and funding. And we'd like to thank Craig Bryant, Director of Instrumental Music at Albany High School, the City of Albany, and the Albany Unified School District for their support in this event. We will be presenting our Artist of the Year awards at the band concert. The recipient of the Visual Artist of the Year for his leadership in the promotion of art and artists in Albany and creative use of the arts in publishing is Peter Goodman, Chair of the Albany Arts Committee. The Performing Artist of the Year is Craig Bryant, Albany High School instrumental music teacher. So we hope to see you all and your families tomorrow night, May 20th at 7 o'clock in Memorial Park for the second annual band concert. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Paul Okuri, Julie Winkelstein, Genevieve Wilson, Eric, and Signe Mathen.
Good evening, members of the council. Everything has been so positive tonight that I don't like to be negative, but on the street on Masonic Avenue, just south of the senior center and whatever, there is a broken area which belongs to PG&E, and I have brought it up to 3 different departments in the city and said, how come this is not fixed? And nobody wants to take responsibility. And so the interesting thing is, when I first said, you know, there's this hole in the ground, in the sidewalk, they put up 1 cone. And every time I complain, additional cones come out, right? And that's all we got, cones. That's not a way to fix something. We should be talking to PG&E and saying, if you don't fix it, we'll fix it and we'll charge you. We can't let PG&E just allow, you know, basically it's a large hole, and it's unsafe because there's so many children and so many seniors that walk right by there. I think we should be doing something about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm sorry to not be making an announcement about a winning team or something, although I'm really impressed by the girls wrestling. I think that's fantastic, and I think that a good point was made about how it used to be there weren't girls' teams like that. So we've definitely made progress, but that's not my topic. I was recently in San Diego for a 2-day library training this last week, and after the first morning, I had lunch with some of the library staff. The topic of homelessness came up because it always comes up when I'm in a conversation, and I mentioned that Albany had actually found a solution to homelessness: offer a nominal amount of money to people experiencing homelessness so they'll leave town, and then make sure they won't cause any more trouble by also restricting their access to specific areas of the city for 12 months. So exclude them and criminalize their future behavior. My lunch companions were, I would say needless to say here, but I think in Albany I do need to say it, they were horrified and actually didn't believe me at first. But I assured them that yes, that's how we do it around here. I know you're ready to be finished with this subject. You're almost to your park, and the fallout from your inexorable march toward that park, destroyed homes, uprooted lives, negligence of your moral and human duties, is something you probably don't give much thought to anymore, but I like to think that you do. I like to think that when you drive by the freeway overpass at Gilman Street, you wonder what you could have done differently. I like to think that when you look back at all the opportunities you had to show the world that you care, and all the opportunities that you let go, that you pause for a minute or two. But I think that's the optimistic and probably naive part of me. My experience with homelessness in Albany has been painful and sad. It hurts me to live in a city where we place a higher value on having a park than we do on caring for all our community members. It hurts me to know that a group of people who were making it by living on the land and by creating a community are now truly homeless. It hurts me to know that some of my fellow community members are gone and that you are actively working toward pushing out 2 more Albany residents, one of whom has contributed more to the city than most people, that is Amber Whitson. Amber is someone I'm proud to know. Her words and her insights have helped raise our conversation to a level that we never would have achieved, and I'm heartbroken that the city of Albany is so determined to expel her, taking away her home. There are always ways to make things work, but they require good intentions on both sides. Your intentions don't appear to be so good. They seem to be based on expediency, fear, and what I can only call classism. You are getting your way, and yours is not a legacy to be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Signe Matson, Albany resident. I wanted to just speak for a second about sowing and reaping. I don't know that anyone in this town reads the Bible anymore, let alone practices the foundational beliefs, but as you sow, so shall you reap. And I just wonder where the consciousness and the conscience, not only of my city council, but my fellow residents, where it lies, what's happened to it, and even what's happened to the intellect. Where supposedly so many people in this town are so proud of this big university, but truly the intellect has disappeared, not only at the university, but in the town, apparently. I've spent a good bit of time recently at the Bulb, and it's quite a marvelous place. And Amber Woodson is a treasure. And I do believe that if you chose to do so, you could do better. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Genevieve Wilson. I'm the chair of the subcommittee for housing and emergency shelter for Berkeley's homelessness task force. I'm also a friend of Amber Whitson, and I want to preface my comments by saying it's not the creation of a state park that I object to, or I'm also not somebody who objects to drawing boundaries where drug addiction is concerned, but I do have grave concerns about the way this process with the Bulb has progressed, and I want to voice those because I care about my friends a great deal, and I care about the city and the part that it has in the East Bay. I'm confused and I'm disappointed in this process overall. I don't understand why a city-appointed task force wasn't allowed the full 18-month process that they were originally promised, and I wonder where we might be if they had had that entire process. I don't understand how a housing element lapsed in the first place, ever, in the city. I don't understand that. It's very confusing to me. I don't understand why people who are demonstrably disabled were forced into a position, no matter what their past or personal habits may have been, to move to a place like the Gilman Overpass or behind a 7-Eleven to wait for housing that they were already actively looking for, and then have those health concerns exacerbated by moving to a place like that in their pursuit of something more. And I'd share Julie's concerns. I don't understand why someone like Amber Whitson, I've gotten to know her through this process. She's growing, she's changing, she's engaging, she's looking for something real. She likes being a part of public process. She shows up to meetings. This is a juice and milk drinking, Rice Krispie eating, Cocoa Krispie munching, what else? Council meetings, showing up to kind of a person, she's normal. Amber Whitson is normal, and she's hysterically funny. She's very articulate. She's been a burr in your saddle. I think you haven't liked some things she's said and done, but that kind of goes for a lot of us, doesn't it? Isn't that school? Gosh, I didn't get along with that kid very well for a while, and then we came to some understanding. So I guess I find myself yearning for some collaborative solution, hoping that the good faith that was originally intended and hoped for by the task force that was originally convened by this group of people in this room, that something that could have or should have happened through that process might still be preserved. And that we might come out of this going, we got through it together. That's what I'm hoping. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Eric Husted. I'm a resident of Berkeley. I'm a member of Share the Bulb, but I'm not speaking on behalf of that group. But I think because of my involvement in that process, I'm also able to let y'all know some of the things that have happened during this process. But I do want to lead with a question for each and every one of you, which some people in this city have had to face, which is, how much would you have to be paid to leave and not come back? How much? Have you thought about it? You probably haven't had to face that question. Because instead of addressing the problem, I've seen a lot of money being thrown at it. For example, the shelter that wasn't effective, that a lot of advocates for people living on the bulb and people living on the bulb came here and said, that's not going to work for these reasons, and here's a different idea. And that idea that came from a community process that actually involved those people didn't get any support from anybody sitting up there, any one of you. For me, the most significant thing that's happened is a community of people has been destroyed, and every one of them, for not having the ability to control their own life in the way that they did on the bulb, for not having the dignity of being able to build something with their own hands and keep it and call it their own. Everybody that's moved away from there, whether they took the settlement or whether they were forced out, has become more vulnerable. I really hope each and every one of you takes a visit to the Gilman Underpass to see what the conditions are like there, because then it really becomes kind of absurd to talk about health and sanitation issues on the bulb and that being a problem. The cycle of criminalization of homeless people is only being continued, and that's a problem that we have to solve as a whole nation, I believe, and I don't believe local governments are capable of solving that issue. But still, there were a lot of opportunities to do better when advocates came here and presented ideas and they weren't listened to. I know that your police department is collaborating with the Berkeley Police Department in enforcing those people from under the Gilman overpass and telling them to move along again. But right now, that's a place where service providers are able to go, a centralized location to do outreach. And I just want to say that every home that's been destroyed there has not had due process followed. And I believe you're in violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act and maybe the Fair Housing Act.
Thank you.
David Danby, Albany resident. I would like to encourage anybody who has been concerned about the weeding of books process at the Albany Library over the last number of months to attend the Albany Library Board meeting tomorrow night. This will be on the agenda, and we're hoping to get an open forum of opinions about this so that there's a little more education about what's going on. Personally, I find it concerning that there hasn't been any communication with the citizens of Albany about this policy. And I think it's time that we raise that at the board level and try to get some more answers. So I would appreciate anybody attending that has any thoughts one way or the other about this. Thank you.
Do you want to give the time and the place?
It's in the Edith Stone Room, 7 p.m. tomorrow night, 7 to 9 p.m., and there is an agenda item about this.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak under good of the city?
Hi, Amber Whitson, Albany resident. Tonight I bring you more sad news. Yesterday I found out that Patricia Mama Bear Moore, a woman who has serious mobility difficulties, is disabled, just got released from the hospital after her leg was nearly amputated as a result of a car accident, and has been working with Charles Joseph for months on end, is living behind some bushes next to the 7-Eleven on Telegraph Avenue and Parker in Berkeley. Joe Rose, a man who uses a walker and who is no longer able to use his bike to get around, since moving under the Gilman overpass, has also been working with Charles Joseph for months on end as well. In fact, both Patty and Joe have long expressed a desire to move in together. They're both recipients of SSDI, and in fact, Charles has taken them both to many viewings of places together. They are both single, disabled, homeless individuals. Therefore, they both fit the federal definition of chronically homeless. In fact, if they had been given a chance to participate in the Home Stretch program, they would have undoubtedly been shot to the top of the list, but they weren't. Instead, they are scraping survival off of the sidewalks of Berkeley. When Francesco Papalia had a volunteer day to start the Cove Enhancement Project, 4 people showed up to help him. 1 woman who appeared to live in contiguous Albany, and 3 women who lived at the Bulb. That's it. Patty and I, the woman who's living behind some bushes next to 7-Eleven on Telegraph in Berkeley, we were 2 of those 3 women from the Bulb. We contribute to this community. I'm not going to stop. My partner has cognitive disabilities and emotional disabilities. I left him at the house to come here, curled up in a ball in a seriously deep funk, because I just found out today that we don't have beyond 2 o'clock on Wednesday. Obviously, you don't understand what disabled means, otherwise you would have granted some of our requests for reasonable accommodations. But I'm telling you now, you're not getting rid of me. So you can either make this easy or you can make this hard. You're going to get rid of me, maybe from the Bulb, yes, but you're not going to get rid of me out of Albany. So you can either have me sleeping on Solano Avenue at night and going to the Bulb every day, all day, and telling everybody who comes through there about the plans for that place, because I do know the East Shore State Park General Plan remarkably well. And the whole thing about unauthorized artistic expression is Third Reich style. So I'm going to make sure I let everybody who uses the Bulb know what you guys are fixing to do there, whether I'm living there or not. So you can either give us enough time to get our stuff out and be polite about something for once, or you can force us out sooner than that, and I'll be sleeping on Solano Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak under good of the city? Next item, please.
All person wishing to speak on an item on the agenda or to fill out the speaker card and provide them to me. Comments related to items appearing on the agenda are taken up at the time City Council deliberates each action item. The mayor will announce when the period for public comment is open on each agenda item. Update on Sustainability Committee analysis of options to fund implementation of the Albany Climate Action Plan. Staff recommendation that the council directs staff to incorporate Climate Action Plan funding into the forthcoming 2014 city budget review session scheduled for the June 9, 2014 council meeting.
Staff, please.
Good evening. The Sustainability Committee has analyzed various scenarios for funding the Climate Action Plan and recommends a 2% increase in the utility users tax, which would provide approximately $200,000 annually. Council reviewed their proposal on April 7th and requested more information on what the projected revenues would be used for, as well as an update on whether the Board of Education would have a tax measure on the November ballot. I'd like to introduce Sustainability Committee Chair Max Way and Vice Chair Charlie Blanchard, who are here to present their updated proposal.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you to the council for the opportunity to give this update. My vice chair, Charlie. So I believe that the first request from council was to describe or delineate some of the potential uses of the revenue of the proposed utility users tax. So I think the council has taken it upon itself to further analyze the most promising options, and I'd just like to describe a few options, not as final recommendations, but as potential candidates. And I just preface that by saying that I think there is the Climate Action Plan, which exists, so that's the starting point, a basis, and staff has worked very hard on implementing existing measures. So I think the first goal or objective is to try to align the uses of the revenue with the largest sectors of greenhouse gas emissions. So for example, building energy use, natural gas consumption, heating energy, is all part of the building energy use, is emerging as the largest sector. Also, transportation, as it is across the entire state, is a large sector. And then thirdly, it would be electricity, but electricity is getting a lot cleaner. So those would be the priorities. So there would be a goal to direct some of the measures to address each of these, but to also look at the most cost-effective or low-hanging fruit, for example. So another objective at a high level is to demonstrate cost-effective greenhouse gas savings, or those which can provide some payback or some cost savings to residents overall, or some public benefits. So specifically, we believe that there's opportunity to increase or leverage staff time. So to augment the existing staff time to do research, to put time into grant writing, to support existing CAP measures such as outreach measures in the community to increase education and awareness. And also, the UUT revenue can provide a reliable stream of, or a reliable source for match funding in applying to grants. The staff has done a good job in securing grants in the past, but this source of funding would continue, kind of provide a bankable stream for matching grants. The funding can also help to support energy efficiency programs, which can save money for Albany residents and businesses. So for example, staff can support outreach programs for energy savings within the community. In the transportation sector, a few items that the committee has considered and likes is to accelerate sidewalk repair. So this can encourage more pedestrian travel, more biking, more safely, as well as providing funding for striping and improved signage on existing bike paths. And finally, to a lesser extent, support for community gardens and the farmers market. And finally, the committee would like to investigate the feasibility of an electric shuttle to provide a commuter service. So for example, to reduce the amount of traffic to and from the high school on a daily basis during the school year.
Thank you. Does anybody on the council have a question for staff or for the chair? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Charlie Blanchard, and I did want to say that Max and I will be happy to address any questions you might have now or later, take them back to the Sustainability Committee if need be. And I just wanted to speak very briefly to the second question you asked us, which was about the parcel tax measure from the school district. I'm a bit embarrassed to try to answer that because the board vice president is sitting here in the front row, and perhaps he should be answering that question. But in brief, I think you can expect that there will be a measure. The Measure I, which was passed in 2010, sunsets in July of 2015. The district is looking to replace that revenue source. While it was at one time thought to be a temporary until state funding returned, the reality is that state funding has not returned. It's going to ramp up, but it will take till 2023 before it really returns to the level expected. And so the new proposal that the board will hear and probably approve at its next meeting next Tuesday. They've had 2 readings of this proposal already. Is for a 6-year measure. It would replace the expiring parcel tax. It would actually increase the assessed amount, but it would not raise additional revenues for the paradoxical reason that a recent court case has made it no longer possible to have a split roll tax, that is a differentiation between residential and commercial rates. And so the new parcel tax measure will be rewritten to be in alignment with current court requirements. So you can expect that to appear. You can expect the board will probably approve it May 27th, if not then June 10th for a November election.
All right, thank you. Are there questions about the tax? Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Okay, No questions from council. Then we'll go open it to the public. We have some cards, and then if you'll line up over here, please.
Carol O'Keefe and Preston Jordan.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Carol O'Keefe, an Albany resident. And I do want to encourage you to direct staff to incorporate the Climate Action Plan funding into the forthcoming budget review to see, frankly, whether you have funds not from a tax to support any of these objectives. I want to recommend that you not consider a utility user's tax at this point for two reasons. The first is the longstanding arrangement that the city has with the school district to take turns, frankly, with tax measures. And I think it's really important, as I think many of you do, to maintain that longstanding agreement and to honor the practice that has been in place for a good many years. The second reason is, as mentioned the last time you all consider this, that the best assessments at this point indicate that the city's climate action goal will be achieved by 2020, the original target that was set. I'm aware there's some difference of opinion about how exactly that determination can be made, and that there is some debate specifically about the Western Forge and Flange Company, which left a few years ago and is in the current calculation accounting for, I believe it's 4 percentage points toward that goal because it has, with its emissions, left Albany. And it's certainly a judgment call how that can be calculated, but one of the quirks of having a city climate action plan is it's a commitment to do what you can, what you have control over in the city. And not only is it not here anymore with its emissions, but you don't have control over what it does elsewhere. So for that reason, I think I agree with the staff assessment to include those 4 percentage points reduction in the calculation. And I do want to ask that you direct the Sustainability Committee and staff to continue their assessments of what's happening over time so that the city can indeed achieve its climate action goal. But for those reasons, while I hope you consider it in hopes of finding some other funding this year for something that really will reduce measurably emissions in Albany, I don't encourage a utility user's tax. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for taking up this topic again this evening. I'm Preston Jordan, speaking for Carbon Neutral Albany. Albany has passed 17 of the last 19 tax measures that it has asked voters to approve to tax themselves. This is over the last 20 years. So that's more tax measures than just one every November. I mean, that's an average of 2 every November. The only 2 measures that didn't pass were in November of 2008, which was during the recession, which suggests that might be why they didn't pass. And one of those measures passed 2 years later in a slightly different form. There are 3 other times that multiple measures have appeared on the ballot, and all 3 times, all the measures passed. So I would encourage you to put this tax measure on the ballot. It's a very small amount compared to what the school tax will be. This is also a measure that's similar to the school tax. It's for subsequent generations and fits in with Albany's culture of intergenerational support. There are good projects to support with this revenue. There's a couple on the strategic plan or the strategic goals that the council has set for improving sidewalk maintenance. Staff has desired to set up a program where staff would actually start surveying the sidewalks and packaging up repair projects that have multiple locations, which would actually end up saving property owners quite a bit of money than each one individually going out and repairing their sidewalk. They haven't brought that program to you yet, I suspect because it's hard to find the funding to pay for staff time to do that, and this would be one way to do that. There's also the cycling paint and sign project, which you heard a little bit about. There's $150,000 allocated in the capital improvement program for that. That includes design, and I suspect that's not enough funding. The median cost of a mile of cycling lane, for instance, is $90,000, and I expect the cost in Albany and the Bay Area is probably a little higher than that, and this program includes more than a mile of cycling lane as well as a bunch of other painting on the streets. There's also some of the most important measures in the Climate Action Plan are what I call RECO and SECO, which is a residential energy conservation ordinance and a commercial energy conservation ordinance. Those can be structured in a number of ways, but they basically require the upgrade of properties in terms of their energy performance at a certain point in time. And Berkeley's had a RECO for a number of years. I have a neighbor who was quite surprised when he bought in Albany that Albany didn't have a RECO. Berkeley's actually looking at upgrading its RECO and implementing a SECO because it realizes it cannot make its goal without those ordinances in place. And regarding the goal, I know there's discussion that we don't need it to meet our goal. I just want to caution you again that that's based on a projection of no increase in electricity use, natural gas use, or vehicle miles traveled from 2012 to 2020. And even with that assumption, the goal is just barely met with a very small margin. So there's some risk, if not more is done, that we won't make our goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Peggy McQuaid, Albany resident. I think with the school district going out for a parcel tax, that if you're going to decide to do this, that you need to be really specific in what you're looking for. And I believe that was one of the directions you sent back to committee, was to give specific ideas, not a laundry list or a menu of different choices, but real specific choices as to what the tax would go for. I don't think you can put a tax on a ballot saying there's these things and we'll pick what we want. I don't think that'll do well with the voters. And also, as you're looking at this, as you add different programs, be sure that you include staff time and the impact on the staff, and perhaps how you could fund more staff to do the work that needs to happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Nick Pilch, Albany resident. Just briefly, I want to support the Sustainability Committee and its members in the urging you to put a tax on the ballot in November. Utility tax makes a lot of sense because those who use the most energy then are taxed the most, and it's an incentive for those using perhaps too much energy to find ways to cut down and to find alternative uses of energy. And briefly, I just want to support that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this issue?
Saul Strand, I'll just briefly state that the only green housing in Albany is multifamily housing, especially in apartments. If you keep the regressive parcel taxes that affects every single unit, no matter how tiny, is driving up the rents on those. And you actually, in the long run, contribute to homelessness. And whenever you come up with these things like repairing sidewalks in front of single-family homes and other things like that, you're actually subsidizing those who should be able to afford to maintain their own property by putting it on to the multifamily units, which are paying a disproportionate amount. You can see that with the sewer tax, where the 500 block of Pierce Street pays $250,000 a year, and all our sewer laterals are inside the building, so we're paying twice. So when you come up with these so-called green projects, what you're doing with the regressive parcel tax is that you're discriminating against the only housing which is green, and causing exclusionary zoning where you force all the multifamily housing to be built outside of Albany, which is probably what the real intent is. So I think this is going in the wrong direction in terms of how you're going about this Sustainability Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to the issue? Seeing no one, I will bring it back to council.
I'd like a clarification first. We heard from the county about their transportation initiative, which will require a supermajority, barely failed last time around. Is that also on the ballot for November of 2014?
It's anticipated to be on the ballot. I don't think the County Board of Supervisors has made a final decision on that yet, but it probably will be.
Well, I can start, or I can have someone else start. I have comments.
Go ahead.
Okay, given what we just heard from Mr. Bond, and this echoes other concerns from other members of the audience, we're conceivably looking at a vote in November where we have 3 different tax issues. We would have the county proposal, or I believe that's half a cent. That would cover transportation issues. Then we'd have something for the school board. And then on top of that, we're considering adding a user utility tax. I think it's too much. And I think you're not going to get Albany voters to go for all 3 of those. And if I had to prioritize the ones that were important to me, it would be the school one and the county one. That's my main concern, but let me say a few more things. There seems, in my mind, to be some overlap between what the enhancements, transportation enhancements in this suggested tax, user utility tax, would be, and what the county 2 weeks ago said they would be providing us as well. So there seems to be some overlap. I'm not sure quite how that works out. My other concern is that there's a disconnect as well. I mean, some of these suggestions I think are very good ones, but there's, in what I've heard and understood so far, there's no direct connection between, say, how improving sidewalks, which is a great idea, would reduce CO2 output in the city of Albany. So I have a concern about that. Fixing sidewalks, like I said, I hope I get around to that. An electric shuttle for schools, that's a great idea, but historically, school districts provide school buses, not cities. So if we wanted to work with the school board, and I can tell you, having been on a school board in Albany, that they are pretty loath to try to get into the business of running school buses in this town, and with a certain exception, special ed being one. But if they were interested in doing that, they wanted to make them electric, that would be great. But that's kind of their turf, not our turf, in my opinion. And they can be very touchy about when we get on their turf. Take it from me, I was when I was on the school board. Finally, I would put my record personally as someone who's trying to reduce my CO2 output in my own life, in my own house, against anybody. I was up this weekend turning on my sprinkler system and timing the water usage rate, and I know some of you have seen my blog. I do this stuff kind of compulsively. So I think it's a moral issue. It's an important moral issue. I take it seriously in my own life. I'm not sure, however, that I feel like as a council member, I want to enforce that moral priority on the town as a whole. I'm not saying I don't. I'm saying I have mixed feelings about it. The reality is, if you study the recent IPCC reports and the trends for CO2 output in China and India versus the United States, little Albany, we could reduce our CO2 output to 0, and it would not make any difference in the world. So this is an issue to me, is like, it's why you vote in the presidential election. You don't vote in the presidential election because you think you're going to make a difference in the outcome, unless you're on the Supreme Court. But you still have a right to you still have an obligation to accept your ethical responsibility to try to do something. And so, when I turn my thermostat down on my water tank or try to water my lawn less, I don't really think I'm going to save the planet doing that, but I still think you have some obligation. So those are the kind of issues I'm struggling with. But to summarize, I would like to review this further in the city budget process. As of this point, I'm not in favor of pursuing a user utility tax, but I could be persuaded.
Is there anyone else who would like to?
The recommendation says that to incorporate climate action plan funding into the forthcoming city budget review session. So are we looking at ways to have a ongoing funding for this type of, either outreach or trying to reduce carbon footprint more than what we have been doing? Is that what this seems to indicate?
It was a dual recommendation, both for, as we close out the books this year, look forward to the next few years to see if there's anything that we could come up with to put towards this. But secondly, so that council could see a menu of the various things that we're looking at spending money on in the future, and this would be one of them. So to take it out of context and just review this as a one and only thing, we're not asking for any more taxes. However, I think it's important for council to see the outlook of our entire budget before we make a decision here.
Yeah, I am concerned. We do have kind of an agreement with the city's school district, although I really feel like we need to do more faster. So yeah, I have a conflict in terms of how to go about this, and I feel like if we didn't do this in 2014, we have to do something in 2016. So I don't know whether by that time we would have a better idea of what the city can support and give money to, or whether we would actually have more money get out of the situation we've been in with no money before. So yeah, it's a hard decision, and I definitely support what the Sustainability Committee has been doing, and wish we had some easy answers for you. So that's where I am right now. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, it is a tough one. I would like to see some of these goals incorporated into our budget one way or the other. The news of the last couple of weeks about Antarctica basically melting away is certainly very disconcerting, and while it's absolutely true, Albany could cut our greenhouse gas emissions to zero, and the world could still go to a hell in a handbasket. But I think given our degree of awareness in this city and goals, environmental goals, sustainability goals, it is incumbent on us to make that extra effort and do things that I think can be an example for other communities, particularly communities of our size. I would have liked to have seen a more defined list when we asked for this before. Some of the things they're all good things on the list. I can absolutely agree with them. But, when we talk about fixing sidewalks or increasing our bike lanes, it's all part of a big bundle. If you want to get people to walk, you have to give them someplace to walk to. So, increasing or getting our downtown more functional, our businesses more vibrant, so people aren't inclined to hop in the car and drive over to El Cerrito or Emeryville or someplace else to do their shopping, I think is part of the agenda. The one thing that I've seen come up in letters and emails that I particularly like, and I think it would have the biggest impact, is this idea of the RICO, SECO ordinances that would increase requirements for energy savings on when houses are sold or when apartments are rented. That would, that could have a very direct link. And given the strong state of real estate in this city right now, I don't think it would affect sales at all. I think people will still be able to sell their home and make plenty of money if that's what they want to do, even if they have to upgrade insulation or windows or any of the other number of things that could happen. So I'm actually, all that said, I am leaning towards thinking that we could consider putting this on. I know this is in conflict with the school district. It's a pretty small measure compared to what the school district is acting for, but I think there's enough consciousness in this city to realize that, yeah, it's going to be painful in the coming years, and we're going to have to do things that turn the big state around, and what we can do in Albany isn't going to affect everything, but we should make the effort. So those are my thoughts at the moment.
I like Pete's idea about the real estate improvements and more specificity from the Sustainability Committee. I do feel we should honor our agreement with the school district, and so I'd like to see us put something on the ballot and maybe commit tonight to 2016 for the utility tax.
Yeah, I pretty much agree. I think first of all, I appreciate the work of the Sustainability Committee. I think there was a lot of thought that went into this process from the time you came to us with your plans, and I appreciate all the work that you've done on it. I do have concerns about putting it on opposite the school district. I think that's really important, but I also feel that we can, within our budget, look for some of these possibilities. And certainly the real estate transfer is a really good way to go. So we can do things that don't necessarily cost money right now for everybody. I mean, unfortunately, we're targeting people, but we may have to do that. So I would like to see it in the context of the whole picture.
Can I just make a
And the chair will.
So just a clarifying point, if all three of these tax proposals were on the ballot in November, the county's a supermajority, correct? 2/3. The school district is simple majority, I believe. 2/3?
2/3 or 55 with a no, not.
55 on bonds.
2/3.
So it's 2/3 and 55 for bonds, right? And then this would also be 2/3. Oh, yeah, you're looking for a lot of votes. Just saying.
That said, I attended some of the Transportation Commission meetings where their bond measure was talked about, and they've gone out and done research, and at least the North County, we're pretty progressive and we're pretty green, and we're inclined to pass things. So I'm when it comes to something like the utility tax or the bond measure, at least in this end of the county, we're likely to be able to come up with 2/3. At least that's what their polling is telling them at this point.
The chair will entertain a motion regarding the item.
Well, I'd like to make a recommendation that we see if we can put it on the ballot and to see if there's enough votes for that, and have the committee come up with something a little bit more specific in terms of what the money would be spent for, given all these things. That's my proposal.
Are you moving it?
Yes, I am.
Okay. You want to repeat it for everybody?
Yes, I'd like to move that we see about putting a utility users tax on the ballot in 2014 with more specificity by the Sustainability Committee as to what the money would be spent for.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Atkinson and seconded by Councilmember Moss that we put the item, the recommendations of the sustainability on the 2014 ballot with more specific items. Is that essentially what you would like? Okay, is there further discussion?
Yes, I'm wondering if you want to more directly address the staff recommendation. Let me just read the staff recommendation. That the City Council directs staff to incorporate Climate Action Plan funding into forthcoming 2014 City Budget Review session scheduled for the June 9, 2014 Council meeting. I would be in favor of doing that, and I would suggest that as a friendly amendment.
Would that be in time to put something on the ballot if we changed our mind? Or is it getting pretty late? No.
That's getting awfully tight.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I'd prefer that as a separate motion rather than adding it on.
Yeah.
So it's not an amendment, you're going to?
No, I agree with Council Member Weil. I think it's better as a second motion.
Okay, so is there further discussion on this motion then? All right, will you please poll the council?
I have the motion again, I'm sorry. We're voting on the right one.
Councilmember Atkinson moved to put the utility tax on ballot with more specific items for 2014.
Fine, it's fine, thank you.
Councilmember Atkinson?
Yes.
Councilmember Barnes?
No.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Weil?
No.
Mayor Thompson?
No. The chair will entertain another motion regarding
I
that.
move the staff recommendation.
I second it.
It has been moved by Councilmember Barnes, seconded by Vice Mayor Weil, that we approve the staff recommendation, which is to direct them to incorporate the Climate Action Plan funding into the forthcoming 2014 City Budget Review Session scheduled for June 9th, 2014 council meeting. Is there discussion on this? Will you please poll the council?
Councilmember Atkinson?
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes?
Aye.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Weil?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Aye, and the motion carries. Next item, please.
Report from Measure D Working Group regarding placing a measure on the ballot to amend residential parking standards. Staff recommendation that the City Council accept the policy matrix and provide direction on the following. A, identify immediate priorities for changes to parking policies that do not require an amendment to Measure D. B, identify preference for potential changes to Measure D for either 2014 ballot or 2016 ballot. C, identify policies to be discussed in the general plan update process. And D, provide direction to the working group regarding any additional analysis desired by the City Council.
Staff, please.
Thank you. In November of 2013, the City Council directed the establishment of a Measure D working group consisting of members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, Traffic and Safety Commission, and Sustainability Committee to evaluate the pros and cons of placing a measure on the ballot to amend the residential parking standards that are part of Measure D. Measure D, to refresh your memory, was a measure that was placed on the ballot in 1978. That, among other things, it did some other things in terms of zoning, but the parking provisions of Measure D required that new residential development provide 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit. Over the years, it's the requirements of Measure D have been perceived by people who are trying to develop housing as a constraint, and through a variety of policy documents in our general plan, climate action plan, housing element, among others, the issue has been raised for the council and city to reconsider those provisions. The working group has been had a number of meetings since November, and have, through a series of drafts, created the matrix that is attached to your agenda packet. In summary, there are really 3 sections to this. The first is that the working group became aware that a lot of the parking policies that can be refined don't require a Measure D action. Some of them we're already working on, others that we could take on with your direction. So, for example, you'll be receiving in the next month or two some proposed amendments to second unit residential, second unit parking, like in-law units, parking requirements. That doesn't require a Measure D vote. There also, as again, just picking an example, the city could pursue refinements to our residential parking permit program to address some of the issues that come up in our residential areas where there's overflow with commercial businesses. The committee also discussed in some detail some of the more innovative programs that are emerging in various communities, particularly with respect to paid parking. There's a book that was published a few years ago called The High Cost of Free Parking that advocates for a kind of a market-based pricing system to help meet our parking demand and supply and bring those two into balance. In addition to those changes that don't require Measure D, there are, of course, things that do require voter amendment to Measure D. And there, the choices really boil down to whether it is something that you take on in 2014, in this ballot, in which case you would need to make a final decision on something going to the ballot in the next couple of months, or it's something that goes on to the ballot in 2016. The main difference between those two alternatives, or two differences. One is the amount of community outreach and analysis that we would do, both in terms of potential environmental review that would be required by the California Environmental Quality Act, as well as meshing it with our general plan update process that's underway. And so, for example, you could have a general plan policy that says revisit the Measure D requirements. And then within each of those, either 2014 or 2016, there are some policy decisions that would need to be made about the scope of what kind of change you would want to make to the residential parking standards. Do you want to target it to particular areas of the city or particular types of land uses, or more broad-based, which is frankly what more cities do. Most city councils have the latitude to adjust parking standards like you do most of the other elements of the planning and zoning code. You can just do that as a city council without going to voters. But that may not garner the support from the community. Parking is always a sensitive issue, and so there's a judgment call there that we need your guidance on. In the immediate term, we're going to be using whatever discussions that come out of your meeting this evening. This Thursday, the Traffic and Safety Commission will be meeting and talking about transportation policies that are now being drafted for the general plan, and we can fold into that discussion anything you give us this evening. And the Planning and Zoning Commission next Wednesday, May 28th, will also be having that same discussion, talking about transportation policies, of which parking is part of that. So I know there are some members of the Sustainability Committee, Planning and Zoning and Traffic and Safety who may wish to address you this evening. I'm not sure if we have a kind of a structure to that, but I would suggest that the council give those representatives who are here this evening who participated a chance to address the council first.
Okay. So do you have a question for staff, or would you like to hear from, if the committee members would like?
Well, I do have one big question, and it's been a question, I think, throughout this discussion. One of the constraints of council, at least in the matrix here, the pros and cons of us putting something on the ballot sooner is the whether or not we need a CEQA for the whole process. And I know we're doing CEQAs through the general plan, et cetera, but a lot of it seems to me to come down to the definition of what a transit priority area is. And the definition that as I read what you've put in here is that it needs to be within a half mile of a BART station. And when I've gone online and tried to Google it, et cetera, it seems to be within a half mile of a bus route where the buses run every 15 minutes. So, it's a big difference there, because one means if we do anything that if council puts it on the ballot, then we are, if we need a CEQA, well, that's a whole process and it takes a while. But if we don't need to go through the CEQA process, we could move ahead on sooner.
Right. So you're right. It's an important technical question. The BART portions of the northern portion of the city, kind of along Brighton, from San Pablo east along Brighton, is within a half a mile of the El Cerrito BART station. So there would be a categorical exemption from CEQA that could apply to that area. There are 2 bus stops that would qualify as transit priority bus stops, and what we're looking for are an intersection of 2 bus lines with a frequency of 15 minutes. And those 2 intersections are Solano and San Pablo and Monroe. So if you combine those 3 areas, we could craft a Measure D amendment that would allow adjustments to only projects in those areas, and that would be pretty straightforward. It's a new law; it hasn't been tested; it's only been on the books this year, but it seems pretty clear. Moving beyond that to do a citywide measure, it's possible. Craig can jump in any time if I'm kind of going off track here. But it depends on the level of controversy and the potential for a challenge. And that's the reality of working with the California Environmental Quality Act, that sometimes, as we've experienced, people can raise issues and we have to go through a process, and that takes a while. So, we could kind of move forward with a scope of change to it in 2014 and see how far we get. Like I said, I'm really comfortable with the San Pablo Avenue and the Brighton area, which are higher density areas. If you get to a citywide measure, we wouldn't be able to use that exemption in quite the same way, and so we'd be, we still might be able to do it, but it wouldn't be as rock solid as I'd like to be able to recommend and bring things to you.
Okay. Other questions for staff?
I'm okay. I just want to clarify this issue for myself. I want to ask some specific questions. The towers, the condo towers, that's 555 Pierce, correct? My understanding is that they only have one parking spot per unit. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct.
And 545 has two.
I believe so.
And 535, I believe, has one, although I've never parked there. So here's my question. If only having one parking spot in a multifamily or large development is so onerous, how come it has never been an issue at 555 Pierce Street in all these years? Or has it been, and I just don't know it?
It occasionally is an issue. If you notice along Pierce Street, there is frequently the public parking along Pierce Street is occupied, and I think that's primarily residents. But they manage.
Or their friends who come up to visit them and can't park anywhere, so they have to park on the street.
Yeah,
When I visit my friends in 555, I don't get to park in their parking lot. There's some guest areas, but okay. Sorry, moving along. Second clarifying point: Piedmont. Piedmont has met or come close to meeting its ABAG requirements, Association of Bay Area Governments, through what's called secondary housing units, which is basically by legalizing in-law units. So and we have a lot of illegal secondary housing units, and one thing that a reform of Measure D would do is allow us to legalize them.
Right.
So what sort of parking restrictions were there in Piedmont, and why was this not an impediment in Piedmont?
I don't know the specific changes to their code, but I suspect what they did, because they don't have a Measure D, they didn't have to go back to their voters. They can amend the parking standards for second units and just said, you don't need to have a parking space for your second unit. Piedmont's a different environment. So the availability of street parking and so forth is a little
But
bit
it's very
easier.
dense. I mean, it's big houses, big nice houses, but it's still dense. There's not a lot of commercial.
Right, there's not a lot of vacant land or commercial land.
Okay, and just for what it's worth, my clarifying point is here, it seems like Measure D was, in retrospect, maybe was not a great idea because no other municipalities or cities in the Bay Area adopted it. And so my kind of hypothetical is, if we hadn't done Measure D now and it wasn't on the books now, would we impose it now? Would it be a good idea now had we never done it? I think the answer to that question is no, we would not think it's a good idea.
Right.
So my suggestion is that we go for eliminating it and trying to get ourselves in the same position and with the same kind of flexibility that many of our other Bay Area cities have. And then the looming question is the CEQA question, which I betcha we aren't going to get resolved in time for 2014. So my prediction is, and maybe something that would be reasonable to work toward, is getting this on the ballot in 2016. And that's all.
Any further questions for the staff? All right, anybody from the committee who would like to speak about the committee's work?
Hi, I'm Nick Pilch, Vice Chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and I was part of the Measure D working group. And my remarks, what we decided to do was to, just for your background, is that representatives of each of the committees could present to you as part of the Measure D working group, and that's kind of the framework, the informal framework that we decided about. And given that, if you would allow me to go over a little extra time, if I have to, I'd really appreciate that. So, as has been referenced, much of the feedback we've received over the years from the Planning and Zoning Commission is that the 2 parking spaces per unit requirement is definitely a deterrent to mixed use and multifamily housing development in Albany. And this requirement is definitely out of sync with neighboring communities and modern planning practice. We're one of the only communities requiring 2 spaces per unit, and one of the only ones where voters have set the law regarding parking spaces per unit, rather than allowing the council to set those rules. It's very strange indeed. This past week, as was referenced, the Planning and Zoning Commission began to take action towards making changes to the zoning ordinance in regards to second units in residential zones, including allowing cars parked in tandem where only 2 are required, increasing height and reducing setbacks toward the goal of maintaining livable backyards, and creation of ongoing amnesty program that encourages safe, legally licensed rentals that in turn help us to create more accurate figures regarding the housing that already exists in Albany. Reducing the number of spaces required for parking can be part of the equation for allowing this to happen, and also allows us to increase our housing stock and increase affordable housing. The Planning and Zoning Commissioners attending the joint meeting supported many of the ideas discussed, including pursuing changing Measure D in our commercial mixed-use and higher density residential zones in order to remove this deterrent to the development of housing. We appreciate, by the way, the formation of a joint group of the appropriate committees to have the discussion and make these recommendations. Taking them together, they can go a long way towards modernizing our zoning and parking policies and towards encouraging housing, and also help us to meet the greenhouse gas reductions outlined in our climate action plan. Transit priority areas. Thank you, Councilmember Moss, for referencing the new law and which is talked about. Currently, there's a difference of opinion among the 2 Planning and Zoning Commission members who represent here. I think Commissioner Arkin would say that he favors a more conservative approach where we just try to apply this in 2014 in the zones where we know we're safe from secret. And would you allow me a little bit more time? Thank you. I am more inclined to suggest a more aggressive approach, and I would request that the council members ask a lot of questions of the staff and of each other. This is there's a lot of details to understand about this, and Councilmember Barnes started to speak to some of them. And I would also suggest that you bring in a CEQA expert to thoroughly analyze what you may or may not be able to get away with in terms of a ballot measure. And finally, you might consider polling about this measure. We really can't know much polling would allow us to get much more idea about what would fly with the voters. So thank you very much.
Hello, Charlie Blanchard, and I will speak for the Sustainability Committee for Chair Way had to leave, but I also wanted to mention that our former chair, Tom Cooper, is here, and he may have some thoughts to add or be able to answer questions I can't answer. I think I mostly wanted to say that there were 3 or 4 of us from the Sustainability Committee who each attended at least one or more of these joint meetings. So we had good participation from the committee, and we did take it back to the committee for discussion. So all of this has really had some processing through the Sustainability Committee. From the perspective of the Sustainability Committee, I think the main thought that I would leave you with is that people who live in denser urban areas drive less per capita than people who live in the suburbs. And so anything which allows for secondary residential units or just a little bit of an increase in the density of housing is desirable from the perspective of how much driving we all do within the larger Bay Area. That's probably the main perspective that I would offer from the Sustainability Committee.
Great. Thank you very much.
Good evening, I'm Peggy McQuaid, and tonight I guess I'm the traffic and safety representative. although I'm probably more speaking my own opinions. And I think that Charlie had a really good point. I think we can say the same for our committee, or our commission, that there were various members there at different times, and that we had sort of different opinions, but we all kind of came to this general consensus. I think one of the things that traffic and safety was perhaps more interested in than the others was the concept of the paid parking. And I think Jeff mentioned it a little bit through Donald Shoup's, the high cost of free parking, but that's certainly something that we're interested in, perhaps not as part of this process, but just down the road. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll open it now to the public, or you're part of the committee. Thank you. You're public. Okay, well, you'll start with the public. Robert, do you want to start?
So I had just a couple of thoughts. I'm actually 2,000 years old, and I remember some of the things that happened in Albany before most of you were born. One was the Measure D was a response to what was happening along Keynes, San Pablo, Stanage, where a lot of single-family lots are being torn down and fourplexes and sixplexes were being put up. And people in those areas became concerned because they felt they were losing the character of the town the way they wanted it. They liked the idea that Albany was a town of pretty small houses and single-family homes, and that there was a concern that this was going to change it. And that's part of what happened with Measure D. And I believe Pier Street was built before Measure D passed, which is why they didn't have the requirement for two spaces per residence. And the reason why we didn't have much in the way of of granny units or secondary housing, small housing units, was because the application of Measure D at that time was that in order to put in a secondary unit, you had to come up with 2 additional spaces. And if your house was built, regardless of when your house was built, you first had to establish that you had 2 spaces off-site, off-street, and then you had to add 2 more. And you had to meet all of the setback and side yard and front yard requirements. So, for example, most houses in Albany, there's an easement, a city easement in front of your house that runs almost 15 feet from where you think your property line probably should begin. So you can't park in the front yard, and you can't meet the requirements in the backyard, and you can't do tandem parking. So in effect, you couldn't put a second unit in unless you were to lift your house up into the air and put in 4 spaces underneath it. So it became impossible. The thing was that there was a court case later that changed that, so that anything done after 1957, any house built after 1957 had this requirement of 2 spaces and then an additional 2, and anything built before 1957 only was required to come up with 2 spaces for any new housing. So your old house didn't need to have any. So that made second units more realistic in Albany, and that's why there's been many more secondary units since that change was made. I'd say this, in my experience, is that this is a much bigger change than you're talking about here. And the very basic contract that you have with the citizenry is all about this. It's about the way housing is. It's about what you can do and what you cannot do. So if you're going to make this change, you really need to engage the entire community and let them understand that this could actually make a huge difference in the character and the feel of Albany. So don't do it without doing that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Clay Larson, Albany resident. I attended several of the meetings, which was more than some of the members. And I thought the committee was engaged, but I don't think they completed their work. They talked generally about the need to revise Measure D, and seemingly endlessly about the strategies and mechanisms by which you might make those revisions, but there was very little or no discussion about the actual way Measure D should be revised. There seemed to be a general agreement that the current one-size-fits-all, 2 parking spaces should be replaced with some sort of proportional requirements, but the discussion never got down to how that apportioning of requirements should be would be accomplished. At the first meeting, the committee was provided with a survey by the MTC, which provided a range of parking requirements for various cities, but it also didn't provide any detail. So I think had that been available, I think comments by Mr. Pilch would be more informed when he states that other cities have smaller requirements. I don't believe a careful review of those requirements will show that's the case. I also don't think the committee, and to some extent even staff, fully understand the legal impact of Measure D. I believe the courts have ruled, former resident Evan Flavel versus the city of Albany, the courts have ruled it applies only to new construction. And there's certainly aspects of the zoning ordinance that appear to have developed in the spirit of Measure D. And one of those is Section 202840, which A2, which was indirectly called out in the staff report. And this requires that when you make an expansion to a single family resident and it exceeds some threshold, then you can be required to have the 2 parking space limits. But that's not a specific requirement. I mean, that requirement's not related specifically to Measure D. And I think the acid test here is the fact that the Planning and Zoning Commission can waive that requirement simply on a finding that it causes undue hardship. So I think the committee should be asked to finish its job. I think it should look at exactly, make recommendations exactly how Measure D should be revised, and also make sure you've captured for the first section of the matrix. Make sure you've captured all the parts of all the current parking requirements that could be revised without changing Measure D.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this issue? Seeing no one, we'll bring it back to council.
So there's a lot of work that's gone into this, and it's a really good issue to take a lot of time with, I think. So I really like the idea of the suggestions for what we can do before we actually go to vote. There's a lot of good ideas, and I know some people want to put other housing in the back, and if you could do that without going to the Measure D with the voters, that would be great. So I would be in favor of figuring something out for 2016 and being more specific about exactly what Clay was talking about. What are the ramifications, and how do you want to really do this? And, making sure the public is involved.
Anyone else?
Well, I went first last time. I have just one quick question, but I can go last.
I like Marge's ideas.
Oh, okay. Well, as many know, this was one of my big issues when I ran for council. I served on the Planning and Zoning Commission. I always thought Measure D was ridiculous, frankly. I understand the history of it. I understand that it was in reaction to multiple family buildings that were being put up on Brighton and Long Canes, and there was kind of a reaction to that. And I think to some degree that part of that reaction was a reaction to what went down on Pierce Street. And this whole idea that all of a sudden the city was changing, it was getting too big, too fast, and people kind of came back. It really had nothing to do with parking. It had everything to do with stopping multiple family housing. And it did a great job at it. It pretty much stopped any new housing development in the city. That might have made sense in 1978. Proposition 13 made sense in 1938 to most of California. It doesn't particularly make sense to people that look at it now. It doesn't make any sense to me, or it doesn't make sense to people on school boards in most places. But, there was a time and a place for everything. I would like to see Measure D basically go away and give the kind of flexibility to planning and zoning to city council that most cities have, that Albany doesn't have. For me, this is ultimately a sustainability, green, carbon footprint issue. It's about cars, and it seems to we seem to sort of worship the car to the point that we have to have 2 places for it. Although not everybody in town even has 2 cars, but everyone's supposed to have two places for their car. For me, there's a saying that goes, you can't spell carbon without the letter CAR. And if we're going to make our carbon footprint smaller, we have to start thinking about ways that we can diminish the use of cars. How does Measure D stop that? Well, it is stopping housing, and housing, I think, is sort of the key to making our Solano Avenue commercial area, our San Pablo commercial area more vibrant and more functional. If they're more vibrant and more functional, people are less inclined to have to drive somewhere else. I've said that before. I found myself agreeing with something that was said earlier on about multiple family housing being the greenest kind of housing. It is the greenest kind of housing. I agree with that. And we're not going to all be living in multiple family housing if Measure D goes away, but we can put it in the right place, and the right place is along Solano and San Pablo. I would like to see, one, that we do whatever we can do right now without putting something on the ballot, and that's the list on the matrix here. Those things we should definitely progress ahead with. I would also like to see something get on the ballot. Now, my preference would be 2014, and it would be, essentially to allow us to come up with the flexibility to look at parking on a case-by-case basis. There are many communities that are light years ahead of where Albany is on this issue, San Francisco, Berkeley, a number of others. We're not those big cities, I agree, but we do need to kind of come up to the times. A lot of this comes down to these sort of tricky CEQA questions about how far can we go without endangering a suit, and I understand staff's hesitation. We don't need any more lawsuits, but I'd like to see this envelope pushed, and that's basically where I'm coming from. So,
well, I would like to see some of these changes that we can do without going to the ballot. I do think that voter education is important, especially because we know that there were two agendas. So I don't think there's time from 2014. I think it really has to go to 2016, but I'm willing to listen to people if you feel like 2014 is okay, but I really think that this one's going to need a lot further discussion among council members and the community. And the staff recommendation is to accept the report and then to give any direction that we want to give. Yes, we heard from the public. Yeah, no, we heard from the committee and then we heard from the public. So the chair will...
I have just a quick clarifying question. Enforcement of Measure D. If this council tonight made a directive to the police chief and said, we want you to cruise down every street in the city of Albany and rigorously ticket every Measure D violation you see, what would that look like?
In the sense of units that are developed, I'm not sure what.
People who turn their garages into rec rooms, so there is really only one off-street parking spot. Is that a violation of Measure D? And have we ever enforced that?
Strictly speaking, I'm not sure. It's certainly a violation of our planning and zoning code. Do we enforce that? No, because it's difficult for us to enter into private property and say, can we go in your garage and see what's going on?
Or people who own 3 cars but only have one off-street parking spot. In my house, I really only have one off-street parking spot. That's
we could do it hypothetically, we could do that for a symbolic gesture, but to really do that in a comprehensive way for 7,000 units of housing in the city, that would be an overwhelming task for us as we're organized right now, and we tend to prioritize our code enforcement to other things.
Right. No, my point being that maybe one of the reasons people don't fully feel the impact of Measure D is because we don't enforce it. And maybe if people understood just what it was that they put on the books and whether or not it's a great idea, their perception of that would be changed if we actually followed our own rules, which we don't. So I just find it sort of an odd conversation to talk about reforming Measure D when we don't really enforce it anyway. It sort of muddles the question for me. So, but I am in agreement with many of Councilmember Moss's point in that I think Measure D was a blunt instrument. I mean, if you want to regulate density, but don't do it through the side door by trying to regulate parking spaces and then ignoring your own rules.
You want to come up with a motion?
So this is just something I'd like to put out there for you to consider.
Do you want to come up with a motion?
Oh, do I?
Mm-hmm.
I move the staff recommendation that the city accept the policy matrix, provide direction on the following, which I believe I already did. Identify immediate priorities for changes to parking policies that do not require an amendment to Measure D, and I think you heard some of those. Identify preferences for potential changes to Measure D for either 2014 or 2016. Identify policies to be discussed in the general plan update process, which we didn't discuss, and provide direction to the working group regarding additional analysis desired by the city council. Did you hear enough tonight, you think, to get a sense of direction? That would be...
Well, we should decide between 2014 and 2016.
Yeah, I agree. I think we heard both dates in some of your discussions, so if we could get some closure on that particular thing, I do think we can capture the other issues you raised.
I recommend 2016, but I'm open.
I second it.
You're saying 2016?
Yes, 2016.
Okay. So it has been moved by Councilmember Barnes and seconded by Vice Mayor Weil that we identify immediate priorities for changes to parking policies that don't require an amendment to Measure D, that we identify preferences for potential changes to Measure D for the 2016 ballot, and we identify policies to be discussed under the general plan update process. And we don't have any other provide direction to the working group. I don't think we had any directions other than those, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
If we're going to wait till 2016,
Yeah.
I think I agree that what you said about education is number one. So perhaps the biggest thing for the working group would be, how are we going to educate the rest of Albany?
Is that part of your motion?
I can add it.
Provide direction to ask
Public
them
education.
to pursue a discussion of the housing and further education on the, okay. All right. Further discussion. Will you please poll the council?
Councilmember Atkinson?
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes?
Aye.
Councilmember Moss?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Weil?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Aye, and the motion carries. Next item, please.
Public Works Service Center. Resolution number 2014-43, approving the preliminary design and specification for the new Public Works Service Center at 540 Cleveland Avenue, and authorization for staff to issue a request for proposal from the design-build developer's contractor. Staff recommendation that the council adopt resolution number 2014-43, approving the design plan and specification and authorizing staff to issue the request for proposals from developer contractors for the new Public Works Service Center at 540 Cleveland Avenue.
Staff, please.
So, Mayor and council members, this is another step in a series of steps that the council has taken in order to construct a new Public Works Service Center to replace the one that we're currently in, which is a leased facility of inadequate size, and the lease is going to be expiring on that facility soon. Just as an update, we have been in a long process of acquiring a property next door at 540 Cleveland Avenue, and we were able to close escrow on that last week after the cleanup of the parcel was completed. So that was a major step that was undertaken. And then secondly, the council had previously authorized the distribution of a request for qualifications for any firm that wished to participate in trying to develop and construct the facility to put in their qualifications, and we had 9 responses to that. There was a table that was attached to your staff report that set forth those 9 responses and the staff committee ranking of the responses, and staff is recommending to you that you create a short list of 5 firms out of those 9, and if you are comfortable tonight with the information that's in these design and specifications that would be attached to the request for proposals, that you would then adopt a resolution that would authorize its distribution to those 5 firms only. It would no longer be an open process. That would be ultimately followed up in approximately 45 days with staff coming back to you, again having gone through a staff committee review process with a single firm that we would recommend to the council to undertake the negotiations for a design-build contract. So one of the keys in using this design-build method, as opposed to using the traditional method where the city does all of the design work through construction drawings and then goes through a bidding process, one of the keys of doing this design-build method is making sure that we have figured out as a city, before we ask for people to make proposals to us, that we have figured out exactly what it is that we want, and that we have some sense of the space that's involved and how we want the space configured and outfitted and so forth. So that's the purpose of having employed the firm of GPA architects, who have gone through an extensive process with staff in figuring out what the needs are for the Public Works Center, not only now, but also taking into account the reorganization that you have recently considered and potential future staffing needs and equipment needs that may be necessary. So with that, I'd like to introduce Jack Panichappan, who is a principal of GPA, and he's going to walk you through the design. The basic elements of that were attached to the staff report, along with a cost estimate of about $6.5 million. And at the conclusion of that presentation, then it would be appropriate to give us some direction about whether you're prepared to move forward or not and adopt the resolution. So, Jack?
Good evening.
Please proceed. I'll fill in.
Good evening. My name is Jack Panichappan, president of Gillis Panichappan Architects. I would like to walk you through the design package. What you're seeing is only partial of the bridging document that we present to the city staff. This is a color design package of it, because other 2 sections is the specification, and the bridging document is more details into how we like to guide the developer to build our facility to meet our needs. So first of all, this is the small public works facility I ever designed. I thought I have one at 1.2 acre was very challenged enough, but this is less than 40,000 square foot footprints, and we have the railroads on the west side, and we have Cleveland Avenue, and the major highway, on the east side of it. So in order to achieve everything that the Public Works is looking for and environmental that we are in, with the city requirement to adopt the LEED goal to this facility. So we end up that we have to stacking the facility into multiple layers, and with that also under the zoning's maximum height. So we with our top of our parapet is approximately about 37 feet, from the finished floor. And with that, we employing the photovoltaics, which is going to give us approximately about 65,000 kilowatt hour per year, which is give us approximately between 15 to 20% of energy use that we use for this particular building. And we everything that we try to do in this case, we run to the LEED score sheet, and it's come out approximately 61 yes, and about 10 maybe, and then about 39 no. So which is give us the LEED goal capability, at this point. And the construction of this major building, which is approximately 19,700 under 20,000 square foot, is a concrete masonry unit. And when we talk about concrete masonry unit, you're thinking about those block, the ugly block that nobody like to see. In this case, we like to employ more of a different color, the earth tone color, which is down to this presentation, you will see a brief of a material format. It will be an earth tone color that matching with the residents on the Albany Hills across the site. So we do, I take a lot of time to select those color. And basically, there's a one way in, one way out, but the roadway is 26. It's approximately 26 feet wide. That would bring, with the regular car vehicle, that would be two ways. But with the large side vehicle that Public Works have, there would be a one way in, one way out. And basically, there's a main building, which is the CMU unit, about 20,000 square foot, and the canopy, approximately about 3,000 square foot. So first, there's the canopy units, which is include the wash bay and material bins and some of the equipments that we try to keep under the canopy to prolong all the equipments, because normally if you park outside, the UV will eat up all the equipment. So in this case, I totally believe that it extend 30%, prolong to the equipment. And this is the first floor of the main buildings. So the entrance is on that side, and then behind that entrance is 8 units vehicle parking at night. But during the day, we have the high density pilings, so to keep all the boxes and everything that the city need at this point, and a little bit far beyond. So basically, we about 20 to 25% extra space, for the future. And next to it, that's the shops, and next to it, that's a freight garage. So at this point, we're looking at only one truck garage that we maintain, because we don't have the staff to run multiple ones. But if run based on the number unit that the city vehicle have, we should have 2, but in this case, I think 1 is a good start. So matter of fact, we have additional long bay. If we treating just regular vehicle, we can perform 2 cars within 1 garage, but it would be 1 for the main vehicle, that 40-foot long type. So this shows the masonry level that we come up, because the reason that the first floor is so high is we want to be able to stacking all the material that we have, to the maximum capacity. So the clear storage in this case will be about 18-foot clear. So the reason for 18-foot clear, when we lift any vehicle up, we want to make sure that there's underneath it clear, and also it's a 1.5 foot, below any obstruction. So that's the OSHA regulations. So with that saying, so I find more space that we can utilize it as a masonry level, so we can add more papers and anything that we may need. So then we go to the second floor, that's the house of the Public Works facility. So typically what they doing routinely every morning, they get together to get their assignments, and that's how the Public Works, the operation, where you see them on the street, where to go. And often what they do also, they do a safety trainings. So that's why we have the large meeting rooms, so they can do the safety trainings. And from my observation, most of the public works, the operation employee, they come back to the house, for having lunch. So I think that was a good idea to have a little space for them, for the pantry. They can warm their food and then they can sit there and having their lunch. And as you go further, that would be the engineering groups. So the way currently what they have is they have a multiple office. So what we try to do is we try to have the open plan system. So in that way, it's easy for the future when they change organizations, they can make adjustment as they go. But the reason they have the multiple office, they used to speak to their colleagues over the phones and so on. That's one of the reasons why we add the additional a small conference room, just 4 people, if in case that they need to talk about the projects, so they can use that particular room. So in that way, we eliminate all the many offices throughout the facility and give us more flexibility. And currently, the plan that they have to manage the street, it was on the individual office everywhere. So what my proposal to them is to bring it out in the center group at the opening area. So in that way, everybody can utilize it and use it, and hopefully in the future everything would be digitizing, so we can gain more space, for the futures. And this is the north elevations. We utilize a lot of windows to the north, so hopefully we don't have to turn on the electricity that much. So in that way we can save some of our energy, and at the same time we utilize the open space on the above the warehouse area, where we want to keep all the mechanical units, and that way we can feed it up to behind that screen. And at the same time, with a request from the fire departments that they, rather than have the straight ladder up to the roof, they rather have the chip ladder up, because their concern is they know that our building is built solidly, but the neighbor to the south may not be. So the request from the fire department is to have a chip ladder to go up with fire department connections in case there's a fire on the south side of our facility, so we can help them stop the fire. So this is on the south side of our facility. So because we built buildings to the 0 lot line, so we cannot have any openings. That's from the 0 to 3 feet. From the property line, we have 0 opening. So because I don't know what will be in the future, that the property on the south side could be empty, could be anything. So in order to keep the building intact, try to shorten that elevation, because approximately it's about 165 feet long. So we come up with a little pattern, try to solve up that the south side of the building. And on the tops, that's the part where it's facing the railroads. So at first time when you're walking around, I see no point typically to do anything, because typically when we do a public agency building like this, we just dress up the front, because every public agency I work to, they don't have a lot of money. So we try to save it just to leave the front to identify where our entrance is, and that's where we come in. But in these cases, it gives us different perspective. I'm driving back and forth to the highway and try to see where I'm seeing our property. So it's turned out that this might be the most facade that most resident or people that drive by Albany will see, with the railroads, in mind. So with the thought of the locomotive, thought in mind. So we come up with a little plan of just like a push and pull, with not exactly a train, but it's somewhat speaking that language, so, and we're gonna have to build that facade anyway, because the function we have in the back. So we just play a little bit with that. So that is the way the slideshow is not exactly the paint is a little more yellowish than it should be. So, but you can see that the pattern is pretty much on the earth tones. And this is the picture from the front, so from the Cleveland. So if you see the top of the building in the back, so approximately is about that high. So, we a little bit taller than the tip of the building on the south side. Okay. Thank you. Question?
Any questions for the staff or architect?
Yeah, I had just one question. I think it's a very handsome building. The CMU block walls, one of the unfortunate things that you can notice down there is that graffiti happens. And how easy is it going to be to clean that kind of, those kind of walls? Not if it happens, but more likely when it happens.
Yes. You're correct. I drove by many times. It will happen. So currently, what we have on the specs is to have a graffiti coatings, on all the exterior wall. So with the graffiti coating, the one that we put on the specs right now is not as thick as you may see, like a science, club when you're staffing the butterflies. They have that type, but I think if we go that far, it will create a look of a plastic, to the building rather than the actual nature of it. So we apply the medium coat to it. So if there is a graffiti involved, so they can come in with a power wash. You can spray it off.
Okay. Other questions?
It's hard to tell how close the back of the building is. Although the train thing seems very nice, I don't know how many people are really going to see all of that. But how close is it really to the railroad, and how much space is behind the building? Yeah, so it looks like there's sort of a highway dots there, but what is that really?
This dot is the easement from the utility company.
From the what company?
From the PG&E.
Oh, okay.
So currently it's the power line that run in the middle of that dotted line. So right here is the in relationship to the highway, the railroad is probably that far, and then the highway would be off, further.
Do we have to pay attention to the PG&E easement there, or is it when you say easement, it's they get to come through underneath there or something like that, or are there lines there?
Yes, this is the above line,
Okay.
that. So and then we have about 10.
About 10 feet.
Right, that's correct.
Okay.
Other questions?
Yeah, I've got a quick one. Can you show me the southern view again of the building? It doesn't have any windows. So there's at least two considerations. One is because it's south facing, if there's no windows, there won't be any sunlight streaming in, and that will ease the heating and cooling expenses.
That's one reason.
But you do have windows on the north side, so there'll be there'll be skylight coming into the building. So there's no air conditioning in this building?
Yes, there is air conditioning.
There will be air conditioning?
Yes.
Oh. Now, there was an issue too, and I didn't get clear on this, I'm sorry, about the zoning, whether or not the zoning allowed windows, and my understanding was that it didn't because it was too close to the property line. But if something changed to the building on the south, say it burned down and they didn't rebuild it, would that have allowed, or would that allow putting windows in the south side?
No, because it's based on our property line. Because we're building on the zero lot line, so it doesn't matter if the building in the south, they take down to the parking lot, we still cannot have the window on that side. Okay. The only way we can do it is we move further away, move the building north.
There is one exception to that. That would be a glass block.
Yes.
Which you could put in a masonry wall like that.
Yes.
But if you're already up against another building, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
That's correct.
Other questions? Thank you. Okay, at this time, we'll open this. Tell them that well, let's ask the council. Would it be the pleasure of the council that this be the last item and that we put the other items over to the June 9th? In other words, the budget mainly. Is that, okay, so we'll do it. So if you're here for the budget discussion, we're going to put that over to June 9. And with that, we'll offer the public the opportunity to speak on the Cleveland project. So if you'll please read these off and read about 10 people's names, please.
Jeannie March, Thomas, Wendy Hugh, Lee Young, Maria Lynn, Dee Jacobson, Janet Lynn, Barbara Fu, Ellie, last name start with E.
Okay, would you like to start, please?
My name is Jenny March. I live at 555 Pierce Street, Unit 1001, which is the front building of the Gateview complex, directly facing your project. And I live on the 10th floor, so I have a very good view of it and all the work that's already been done on the cleanup. I was really interested in seeing what the east facade was going to look like, but the presenter did not mention it. It didn't look very attractive. In fact, the railroad view looked more interesting than our view would have been. And you're talking about hundreds of people along these three complexes that view this on a daily basis along with your other properties down there. We're a population of at least 10% of the city. I'm sure you're aware of that, but many people in the public are not. And we contribute close to 15% of the property taxes. With not showing the eastern facade, that shows the importance of the planners to the people who are looking at this every day. To get to the sign, the electronic advertising sign, I had a discussion today with Jeff Bond about this, and also in reading the materials, I've become a lot more educated about what is planned. It appears that this sign would be higher than the building itself, that it is instrumental toward the financing of the project, and that it's going to have a large impact on the people looking at it from across the street, and probably even more so than the people who are going up and down the freeway, who are the ones that are supposed to see it. We have one of these electronic signs presently, which doesn't impact us a lot, which is in the Pacific East Mall. That's probably as a replacement sign, but it didn't go through any reviews, I've been told. So please take a look at us, consider us in both the facade and that particular sign. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Tom Thomas, resident also at Gateview, the green one-car condominium complex over on the other side of the hill. I've been studying the seal of the city here, and it says urban village by the bay. We think of ourselves as a vertical village by the bay. I noticed that the sign, the design there shows more or less the city on this side of the hill. And on that side of the hill is maybe in some people's minds the wasteland with the railroad and the freeway and place for this building. No problem with the building, but if there is going to be a 6-story tall winking, blinking sign that'll be on all night, I just want you to think that that's not going to be the urban village by the bay, but for most of the people on that side of the hill, it's going to be the great glowworm by the bay. And I don't think that's a good idea, even if it generates some revenue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Okay, my name is Wendy, and I live 545 Pierce Street. I'm here not to talking about the money, the house value we are going to lose. I'm here because I'm a mom. I have to fight for my daughters a chance to enjoy the beautiful world. I have two daughters. One is 7 years old, and another one is 3 years old. All of my daughters enjoying looking outside the window and see the beautiful sunset every day. I'm here to share what my daughters told me recently. By the way, her name is Samantha, and she is in the 1st grade in Marine School. Last week, her teacher asked them to describe their house. My daughter said she has a cool home because she can see the Golden Gate Bridge through her window every day. She is so happy, and all of her classmates are so excited and happy for her. What I want to say is our world is already filled with too many advertisements everywhere. So please do not destroy our kids' happy life, and please give them a chance to enjoy the beauty of our nature world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Li Yang. I'm here to voice my strong opposition to the proposed construction of billboard at 540 Cleveland Avenue near the Pier Street. I live in Albany since 2007. I'm a resident at 545 Bridgewater condominium. I love the Albany community and especially enjoy the view of Golden Gate Bridge and the bay from my apartment. However, I'm shocked to learn that the city is proposing the construction of a gigantic billboard at such location near the highway. Did the city council consider the health and the well-being of the residents living in 545, 535, and 545, those three apartment complexes? Like the person pointed out, it consists about 10% of the population of Albany and also 15% of tax revenue. How could you sleep at night with a gigantic billboard flashing at your windows? I mean, it seems to me pose a direct threat to the public health of the residents nearby. I mean, I'm also wondering how the current location was chosen. Why not in the center of the city along the Solano Avenue or along the San Pablo? I mean, apparently the city wants to minimize the environmental damage of such a billboard. Considering the number of residents living in those areas, I think the city is discriminating of those residents. In addition, considering the detrimental effect of the proposed billboard on the property values, will the city actually gain anything if let the proposed project proceed? There are about 800, roughly about 800 resident units in those three apartment complexes, which provide huge tax revenue for the city. Any depreciation in those property values could easily offset any tiny gains the city could get from the proposed project. I strongly urge the city council to stop this short vision approach and abandon such a project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Maria Ling, and I'm a homeowner at 545 Pierce Street, and I strongly oppose the 2 digital billboards that the city is planning on installing at 540 Cleveland Avenue. I understand there's a need to fund the construction of the new Public Works building. However, the installation of a commercial digital billboard is a completely different issue. Digital billboards are atrocious. They not only affect the residents living close to them, they also distract drivers. And the fact that that the billboards will be next to our beautiful shoreline is unconscionable. Over 60 Clear Channel digital billboards have recently been ordered to be turned off in the city of Los Angeles. Why are we turning them on in our quaint small town city of Albany? The fact that the digital billboard is installed at the waterfront, the light emitting from the digital billboard will be reflecting on the waters. The moonlight casting on the bay water at night will never be the same. Public Works is for the entire community of Albany. Funding for the building should come from the entire community as well. A report that I recently read from the city to learn about all this shows the revenue from Clear Channel is approximately $150,000 a year, assuming there are about 8,500 households in the city. A viable alternative is to bring the issue to the entire city and distribute the cost of about $17 per parcel per year. That's about a haircut, a supercut plus tip. I think that's only fair. The digital billboard installed, instead, if we do that, we are essentially robbing the rights of quiet enjoyment and property values of homeowners on Pierce Street. I think the development of the Public Works building should not fall on the backs of this one neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ella Ng. I am a homeowner and resident at 545 Pierce Street, which is the Bridgewater community. I am also a member of the board for the Bridgewater Homeowners Association. I think my words cannot better express what my neighbors have been speaking out, but my words are very simple. As a member of the board for Bridgewater Homeowners Association, I formally voice our opposition to the installation of the digital billboard. The billboard negatively affects our Bridgewater community and our surrounding neighbors. Bridgewater has a direct line of sight to the billboard and would impact the view from our community and the quality of life for our community members. So I'd like to request that you reconsider the installation of the billboard. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Dee Jacobson.
And mic up. Thank you.
There, I'm tall. My name is Dee Jacobson, and I'm an owner and resident at the Gateview condominiums at 555 Pierce Street. And I don't want to repeat a lot of what's already been said. I'm very much against this huge digital billboard that I understand is planned to go into the area at 540 Cleveland Avenue that will directly and negatively impact the view from my home, as well as my property values. There's an acronym called NIMBY, not in my backyard. And I think that if we were on your side of Albany Hill, you would not even be considering putting this up. It is because we are on the other side of the hill that you don't consider it, and it's just wrong. It just will totally negatively impact our homes, and I'm totally against it. We're 10% of the population. We contribute a large amount of money in our property taxes, and we vote. So I hope you will consider that and not put this billboard up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and esteemed council people. I'm going to try not to repeat all of the comments of my colleagues, but I want to point out something that there's a couple of things that have been very clear in this process, and there are many more things that have been very unclear. What's clear is that the city needs a new public works building. What's clear is that they needed land to situate that building. And what is very clear is the city needs the money to finance the building. Those things are clear, but there are many things such as the role of Clear Channel as a funding source. What's interesting to see is that the architect spent a lot of time on his design, but nowhere in his design does he talk about the billboard. That's interesting because it seems to me that the whole building scheme is predicated on the billboard. Clear Channel has already been identified and cemented in as a funding source. Clear Channel is supposed to provide $150,000 of revenue. That's 1/3 of the annual lease of $450,000. I understand the other two components are going to be from the general fund and from the landscape and maintenance fund that was formerly used by the community center, which is no longer has to be used by them. So from the get-go, the decision to use Clear Channel as a partner has been clear, except that we didn't know it. We, the citizenry, did not know that. As early as October, there was a decision to negotiate a ground lease to Clear Channel, and that is based on your staff report. There was a decision to not go through the voters process. That was made in October. The staff report provides no detail on why that decision was made to bypass the voter process. It talks about weighing the cost benefits and looking at the projected revenue sources, but nowhere is there in that verbiage a discussion about why you're not going through the voters. Why not go through the voters? You guys have a very good track record of getting your referendums passed. I think the city of Albany has trusted your stewardship. The general point I want to make is it seems like the cart is being put before the horse. Today, you are supposed to decide on whether the ordinance should be approved that allows you to negotiate with Clear Channel. Well, you have been negotiating with Clear Channel already. The RFP, I'm sorry, try to be really short. The RFP has not been issued. In it, it appears that the integral part of the building scheme is for Clear Channel. That's on, I believe, page 5 of the RFP. Another thing is, we've been told that the RFP has not been issued. But if you look at your own RFP, the release date was April 22nd. So why are we voting on whether the the staff is allowed to release the RFP if the release date has already passed?
Finish.
Okay, that suggests that there needs to be more transparency in the process. We urge you to consider the permanent effects of the billboard and to look for other sources of financing this building. Thank you.
Next speakers, Robert Benjamin, Keiki, Sol Strand, Adele Alon, Chris Kirkham, Brian Parker, and Robert Chasey, and Norman LaForce.
Mayor and Council, I'm here today speaking on behalf of Citizens for the Albany Shoreline, Citizens for East Shore Parks, and Golden Gate Audubon. I was just wondering if you were planning to do a CEQA review, because this kind of light activity at night will drastically affect the bird life on Albany Marsh. I think that this is a bad idea. Actually, I think this is a terrible idea. LED billboards are not something that we should participate in and help proliferate. If we decide that there's a reason to do this for the monetary advantage, it's understandable that the city always wants to consider that. But imagine if every city did this and we had billboards like these all the way from Los Angeles out to Sacramento. And if you're going to put a billboard on top of this building, why not allow the neighboring building to put a billboard on top of that building and then the next neighboring building? And pretty soon you can't even see beyond the billboards. It's a terrible idea. It's the reason why Lady Bird Johnson spent much of her time in the White House stopping the proliferation of billboards all across America, and the Beautiful Highways Act was passed to stop the proliferation of billboards across America. And now we're not only having billboards, but they're lit up all night. It's a terrible thing to do to the people who live in 555 Pierce, 545 Pierce, and I guess the people from 535 Pierce haven't even heard about this. I only found out about this tonight. This is a really, really rotten idea. Please don't do it. I'm sure we can figure out how to build a courtyard and a court building and take care of public works without destroying our visual advantages of the bay and putting this right on the shoreline. It's visual blight of the worst sort. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for the opportunity to address you. My name is Robert Benjamin. I live in the Gateview complex on Pierce Street. You're well aware of the digital billboard already on the Pacific East Mall property, which we know is not your fault. It's City of Richmond put that in with no review I ever heard of. You may not know that that billboard puts out so much light. My condo is never truly dark. Unless that's out of service, and we've only had that good fortune for a couple months out of the last several years. So whenever these things are lit and blazing, there's an awful lot of light that comes out, and it really does change the quality of life in many of the residences, mine in particular, at Gateview. So I hope for, and I know I really can expect better from the Albany City Council than the consideration Richmond City Council gave to our needs, which is, of course, none. So I hope you'll reconsider this. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Ketki Shah, and I also live at Gateview Complex. And most of what I was going to say has already been said by a lot of people, and so I'm just going to urge City Council to find an alternate source of funding. I mean, I do understand that everything needs to be funded, but I'm sure there are other ways that this building can be funded, and I would urge City Council to look at every option besides putting a billboard in front of 3 residential complexes that will be greatly affected by this billboard. And on another note, if you look at Gateview currently, they're being repainted, so the color scheme may need to be thought of again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sal Strand, Pierce Street. I think a lot of the council members ran on transparency. It's a very popular word by politicians. It's always used by you. And it is so ironic that this billboard can be kind of stuck in the fine print at the bottom, and you knew it would be a sensitive subject. I was told out outside of the room when you were in private session that Peggy Thompson reclused herself last October.
I abstained.
Yes.
I did not recuse myself.
Well,
I abstained.
Okay.
There's a difference.
There's still so much confusion as to how this was all done, but in a way it was all done in secret as far as we're concerned. And it's an absolute outrage. You would never do it in any other part of the city. You wouldn't even get the first base, or you wouldn't get out of the batter's box, or even the on-deck circle. And when every single resident there is against this digital billboard, even if you have a hill view, because a lot of people walk down in our plaza on top of the garage. We've got a mini park there, and I see from my balcony people walking at night. We put in LED lighting on the plaza, and they just enjoy going out there in the evening and walking around. And I've seen Chinese residents that doing tachi or whatever that you call that. And it's part of the view and the natural beauty of the area. And for the callousness in which you're marring the landscape and sticking it in the fine print is just unbelievable. I can't even fathom what was going through your minds when this process started, and it's been kept in the dark from the residents. I go back through all the history of how the Crusoe development and all these other controversies over the waterfront, and there's a whole EIR section on views from the Albany Hill and from the Solano Hill and from all different vantage points, and how you ought to do all kinds of elaborate studies to protect the views of all the dear citizens of Albany. But the callousness in which you've been dealing with the views of the people who live on the west side of the hill is just unbelievable to me. So I think you should just delete this footnote, which is the digital billboard, and go back to square one as to your funding sources. Please.
Thank you.
Janet Lynn. I also live at 555 Pierce Street, Gateview. I've been there for over 30 years, and I've enjoyed the view from, I look out on the Marin Highlands, Marin County sunset view. And I was astonished that we were not notified. We weren't given ample notices to come to a hearing. When I heard about it, it was like a last-minute posting to tell homeowners about it. So this impacts our property value, our views, and our quiet enjoyment. And I've had it for over 35 years, and it will directly impact our property value. And when I look out, I'll be looking at bright billboard, just like the ones at the market, Ranch 99. Changes like this by the city, I thought you're supposed to have several public hearings for ample notices for all the residents to come and air out their opinions. And it was just approved so fast, and without consideration to the residents on that street. There are over 800 units there, and as a lot of people have already told you, that we are over 10% of Albany's population, and I'd like to emphasize again, we contribute over 15% total Albany revenue to the city of Albany. So I'd like you to please reconsider this. You all have noticed the neon signs leading to Nevada, and how would you like it if one of these billboards, several billboards, were placed on Solano Avenue with the reflecting lights from the single-family homes on those side streets? Just, it's not like someone said, doing it in somebody else's backyard. It's like, this is not the first time that we who live on the other side of the hill are not given consideration by the city of Albany. You pass things without due consideration for the citizens on the other side of Albany Hill. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Idal Alan. I am the president at Gateview Homeowners Association at 555 Pierce Street. I am here to reinforce everyone's opinion here about no to the nice billboard sign that helps try and fundraise for this building. I do agree with the building. It's great, but I do think that we do need to find a different source. At 555 Pierce Street, we are at 487 units. So we're not just talking about one home, not 3 homes. We're talking over 800 homes. One of the best things about the view that we get, and that I tell people all around, is on a really good, clear July 4, you could see 5 sets of fireworks. And I don't want that to be interrupted with a Coors Light billboard ad for, for me to drink beer on July 4. So again, please reconsider this line item on the billboard. The building itself is great. Find other resources to fund it, but no on the billboard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Chris Kirkham. I'm a resident of Albany. I live at 545 Pierce Street, up on the top of the 4th floor of the 2nd building. I've got a wife and 2 kids that live there too. I bought that unit at a premium. I could have bought a unit down on the 1st floor with no view for about $50,000 less, and that was in 2002. So view comes at a cost, and I don't want to yield that when I sell my unit. I wanted to talk a little bit more about what a view means and go back to the seal here. There was some talk about this occurring on the backside of the hill. Notice that a bridge is in this seal. We don't have any bridges in Albany, but it's symbolic. This view is symbolic of something great. It's symbolic of something inspiring. When I look out of my window, I have this incredible view, and it gives me a time to reflect. It gives me a feeling of space, which often is welcome when you're crowded and pushed onto a BART train or whatever. It's healing. It's so fundamental to what we are. Look at the gate view. They've called their units gate view. It's the view of the Golden Gate Bridge, right? Look at Bridgewater. We have named our 104 units after our view of the water and the bridge. And likewise with Bayside Commons. I want to switch the topic now to the ordinance that was passed to make this all possible. I don't see it as a fair trade. I think there was an intent in there, but basically what it is there are no additional billboards in Albany, right? We take one down in order to put one up. Well, that's actually not what's happening. Apparently, we're going to have a double-sided billboard put up on this piece of government land. So we're actually getting 2 billboards instead of 1, where we take Montero's down. There's 1 at Montero's, is there not? Is there 2 at Montero's? Oh, I'm sorry, then I was incorrect. So then my last comment was this mixture of commercialization and the government, right? We don't play commercials in high school classes. We don't have our public vehicles driving around with ads on them. I don't think that we should mix this commercialization with our property. I don't want people associating the city of Albany with, the Taco Bells or the next Hollywood blockbuster. I don't want them associating our city with commercialization. It's not what I'm for. It's not why I moved here. And I think it's a bad mixture. It would reflect poorly on us. So please, I'm dead against any billboards on that property. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brian Parker. I was here 6 or 8 months ago when this came up, and I was addressing a couple issues then. And at the time, I made the statement that, well, if we can keep my taxes from going up, put a billboard up. I will repent and realize that was a big mistake. I want to speak out 2 things. One's the billboard, and one's the size of the building, which I talked about before too, and have had no impact on the conversation here. The billboard, this inclusion in your packet has no dimensions on it, no heights. I think you've done a disservice by your staff. I think it deserved better, and it didn't inform the public. It's unusual. You could not get to a planning commission with something like this. I think the issue, which is probably not known to most people sitting in the public, but was alluded to by the last speaker, that there's going to be a trade-off, and it really is. I live on this side of the hill. I live next to San Pablo, so I don't think I'm part of a favored class or anything. But the deal is to put these billboards up. 2 billboards come down at the intersection of Solano and San Pablo. And, I didn't give it much thought before, but I think that's unfair. I think the trade-off is benefiting us, kind of us on this side of the hill. And, I think it feeds into the feeling on the other side of the hill, and I understand where they're coming from. On the other issue of the size of the building, I want to come back to that. amazingly, the size of the building went up 15% since I came and suggested it should have been made smaller for efficiency and many reasons. It got increased by 3,000 square feet. It's now 20,000 square feet for 11 full-time and 2 part-time employees. Now, I might be a little bit off on my head count. That's what I pulled off the city website. So that's almost 2,000 square feet per building. And I think with some judicious use and redesign so that spaces can be used for different things, we could get just a fine public works building and figure out how to get along with less. It has 3 conference rooms in the second floor. I hadn't seen that floor plan with the seating, but there's like seating for 2 or 3 times as many people who work for the department, and half of those 11 people go out and they're out working in the field. They're doing stuff all day, and I guess on rainy days they'd be around, but I imagine they have other things to do in rainy days too. There's 3 conference rooms, one of which substitutes as a training room. There's a storage room for the training room. There's a server room in the age of cloud computing, which is about bigger than the size of the Public Works Director's office. There's 1,800 square feet of mezzanine storage space where you can go for pennies, store, cloud storage is just unbelievably cheap, and scanners are great now, and I still don't know why this. There's a mail room in this thing. I guess you have to have one, but maybe it could be the corner because I think sadly mail's on the way out. My father was a mail carrier for 25 years. And then lastly, it's just too much. I think it's probably 3 or 4 times what we have, I bet. And so I don't want to raise our taxes. I don't want to have a big billboard. I don't begrudge the Public Works Department a nice place to be and adequate public facilities that are modern. But I don't know how it got bigger. I was promised by city staff that they would sit down with me after my last presentation and show me the space study of why they needed the space, and then it got bigger. I never got offered that, Pat, and I'd still like it, but I look at the floor plan and I just don't believe it. It's necessary, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the council. I'm Norman LaForce. I speak tonight on behalf of the Sierra Club, and also since Spraldiff has been in the news recently in regard to the Albany Beach, on behalf of Spraldiff as the president of Spraldiff. I would urge you on behalf of both those organizations to strip out this billboard from this proposal. You have a massive, very ugly tiger by the tail that's going to bite you very badly. The billboard on that is a wrong concept. It's an incredible light pollution source. The people in Gateview are going to be horribly impacted by that. And I think you have to ask yourselves, as I would when I was on my city council, would I vote for this if it were on the other side of the hill at the corner of Solano and San Pablo? I don't think anybody in this council would do that. In addition to the impacts and visual and aesthetic impacts on the people on that side of the hill, you also have and will have environmental impacts to the Albany Mudflat Preserve. This is a preserve. It was created, and actually your prior council voted to save this as a wildlife sanctuary. It is well documented that there are tremendous light impacts to wildlife from lighting, human lighting. This will have a tremendous impact on the wildlife of the preserve. I can guarantee you this is not going to be approved by some kind of negative declaration. This is going to require a full environmental impact report if you're going to go forward with this sign of the size and dimensions that you have, because there are going to be tremendous human aesthetic impacts that will have to be dealt with, and environmental impacts on the wildlife of the Albany Preserve. This all came up rather abruptly, I think, because a lot of people really didn't realize where this was going with the council. I certainly wasn't aware of it until very recently. I apologize. I was spending a lot of time dealing with billboards on the entrance to the Bay Bridge, which the Sierra Club opposes, and also having to spend 2 city council sessions, 2 hours each, on this issue alone in Richmond, with dealing with the issue of the Pacific Mall sign, because a majority, fortunately, on the Richmond City Council were able to vote to have that sign reviewed again because it had not gone through the proper reviews. And that's now going back to the Richmond Planning Commission to deal with that, and hopefully something will come of that, because people are very upset about that sign. And that's only like 1/3 of what I see is the size of this sign. So I would urge you, for the sake of the community and wildlife, strip out the billboard from this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening again. I sat through several council meetings when this was discussed, and I didn't really think a lot about it. At the time, it seemed like we needed money. This was a good way to get some money. But listening tonight, I think the people here are making a good point about the impact on their properties, and I do think that both Mr. Chasey and Mr. LaForce made good points regarding the wildlife on the waterfront. And so I really urge you to look at this again, to think about really how impactful and perhaps how hurtful this will be to the community, and to reconsider this idea. And working together, we can figure out how to get this building done, because the building's important. We need the building, but we don't need to damage Albany to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this issue? Seeing no one, we'll bring it back to council.
I'll set it off. Thanks, everybody, for coming out on this tonight. When this first got proposed as a funding mechanism, I will have to admit, I thought this is a pretty good idea, and I think it still has some possibilities, but I don't think any of us saw how big this thing was until we got plans tonight on one of the proposals that this thing was above the maintenance center. That's influencing my thinking right now, although I would say a few things. One, from what I can see on these plans, I don't see light coming back onto the condos and the towers. It appears as if the way the orientation is in this plan, which I'm not saying I favor, but it doesn't appear that the light bounces back onto residences. The height, though, for me is an issue. It is higher than I would have thought. I think when I was first thinking about digital billboards, I was thinking about the one on 80 in Berkeley, which is basically down at the height of a building. And that makes a lot of difference in the way we're looking at it. I think that I'm still think that we should kind of proceed with looking at this, but right now the design about the billboard that needs some more reflection. There are other things in this building. Brian Parker mentioned that he thinks it's too big. There was a wish list put out, and I know that it's the natural tendency to kind of fill the wish list, and this has done it. But in the eventual process, as we become more urbanized, we will need more infrastructure, and it takes infrastructure to create infrastructure. And right now we're taking on the sewer laterals, we'll be taking on other things as they come across. And as Albany grows, which I think it will be growing in some constrained ways, this is probably a building more for the future than what we need right this moment. One of the things I particularly like about the building are the solar panels that we've wanted to put on. And I think the system of putting those on, which is essentially you can do it in your own homes if you have the space. You rent the space out to a company who puts up all the capital, puts in the solar panels, and then you buy the energy back from them. And that makes a lot of sense for that kind of technology. The other comments I was jotting down here as I was listening to comments tonight, this idea that we are an urban village. there's two parts to that idea, urban and village. Urban means that we are getting more concentrated, and there's a lot of stuff that's bumping up into each other. And here we've got a residential section across on one side of the freeway, and we have the commercial, essentially our answer to an industrial section on the other. And they're going to impact each other, particularly, the visual idea. So this is going to keep coming up. When I was on planning and zoning, there would often be somebody would want to pop up or do something on their individual house. Every neighbor around would come and say, but it interferes with my view. We don't have a view ordinance in Albany. And we've never had one, and because of our size, we probably are served well by not having a view ordinance. And I know that's terrible if that's what you live for, but we don't restrict things because they might block somebody else's view. It's at least not on the books. We don't automatically do that. That said, if we are going to proceed with this as a mechanism, it needs to come down, and it needs to be, at least below what our current height limit is for the CMX zone, which is 45 feet. I think this thing, as far as we can see, is probably over 60. So, I think with moderation, it might work. I'm also, if somebody has a great idea of how this could be financed without this mechanism, let's proceed in that direction. Anyway, that's some quick comments.
Well, after hearing people and seeing this, it feels like it really is really big, and I don't know. Anyway, I'm not ready to say we should go ahead with the billboard without having some more explanation, and I wasn't really aware of how much it would probably impact the environment on the other side. So I don't know. I'm really conflicted in terms of voting for it at this point. I don't know. I don't like any of it right now. I feel like we've done a lot of work, and I don't want to give all of that up. But I really feel like I'm having trouble seeing all of the things that are being planned in terms of how much there is there for not that many people. So I don't know. Still thinking.
Well, I'd like to see it, the billboard conform to the height ordinance. And then I think when we had all these meetings, we were reassured that the lights would not be reflecting back to the people on Pierce Street. And then in terms of wildlife, I'd like to hear more information about that. Like how are lights from billboards different from freeway lights that are on constantly on both highways? So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with what everyone else has said. I would be curious if the Sierra Club or the other environmental groups have ever studied the billboard further south on the freeway, the one that's near, the electric billboard, the one that's near the wooden duck, the warehouse that just burned down. That's my recollection. I'm certainly, now I have a concern that's procedural, and I need to run this by our attorney. As I look at this item 8.3, it says that we are, the staff recommendation is to approve the designs and plans and specifications and authorizing staff to issue RFPs for developer contractors for the new Public Works Service Center at 540 Cleveland Avenue. Does that include the specifications for the sign? That seems to be a separate contract to me.
I think that's correct. The sign is not within the scope of the design, the building specs that you're being asked to proceed with.
Yes.
It's not directly related, but they are interrelated. So from the standpoint of financing the facility, if the billboard is something that the council is uncomfortable with, then I think we would need to go back and determine if there are other means of financing the facility. And that may be the appropriate thing that you may want staff to do tonight, is you can just hold this issuance of the RFP over until your next meeting, and we could do some additional work in that regard to answer some of the questions that have come up.
Well, given the lateness of the evening, you know, I think our city engineer, Ray Chan, could speak to the size of the building, but I don't think I want to do that tonight. I think the city could defend its honor about the process and the notification that has been done. I think actually that's been done better than some of the speakers had suggested, but I don't want to do that right now either. I think the reality is I do not have a very good visual sense myself, as someone who has friends in those condos who goes to 99 Ranch a lot, about what this thing looks like. And I think we can flesh that out and look at the options for how this billboard could be placed. I just don't know enough about it one way or the other to have a strong opinion tonight. However, if the shape of the rest of the project is contingent on that billboard and whether or not we approve it and where it goes, then we're kind of dead in the water for tonight. So my sense is, yeah, we need to hold off on this until we can get this all resolved in one fell swoop. And so I guess my motion would be to hold this over.
Let me speak first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, because I'm in a different place. I apologize for interrupting you, but to recuse myself would mean I have a conflict of interest. I have no conflict of interest. I abstained simply because I'm old enough to remember billboards being considered blight, and now I consider them blight with a safety issue. However, at that point, I saw no other source for the funding, so I didn't vote no. But I do have a problem with billboards and blight. And I also have concern about the size. This was discussed when it was going to be further down Pierce Street. I know we need to look to the future, but I also think that we need to try to maintain the most efficient and economic resource that we can. And so I really would like us to make sure that this building meets our needs but doesn't exceed the needs. And that would be tied also to the cost, because the cost is now $7.7 million. So those are my concerns.
So it sounds like we'd like to have this returned to us and look at both the proposal for the size of the building and then also funding and specifications about the billboard.
Okay. Do you want to do it by
That's my
consensus
motion.
or by motion? You want to do it by consensus?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right. Everybody agree to come back? Okay,
Mhm.
great. So this will be continued to the next meeting, and that will be on June 9th. June 9th. Okay, next
So I'd like to know what point, like, some of these things we haven't seen till tonight, you know, in terms of this last week. So to vote on some of the things that, like, I see in the details, it's like, oh my God, what, like some of the people said, there's a this and there's a this, and there's like only 11 people that are never hardly there. So when do we tell you, like, oh my God, you know, why do they need this and why do they need that? And, you know, maybe like all my experience with the architects I've dealt with, it's like you put everything in there and then you have to scale back because eventually you can't afford everything. And I'm thinking maybe we can't afford everything. Mm-hmm. If that makes a difference on the 150,000, then I certainly would want to look at that.
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay.
Other comments? Okay. All right. Thank you. Next item, please.
Other business reports on meetings attended, announcement of events, future agenda items. And the next city council meeting has been rescheduled to Monday, June 9th at 7:30 p.m. in the council chamber.
All right, anybody have a comment? Okay. Then the meeting is adjourned.
not doing closed session.